And some pathways going Emily's that are considered.
What is this Emily's thing? Is this true?
Yes.
Look me in the eye.
Richard gets them all trained up and then they move on.
Where are you going?
I have a job with the University of California working with a young family brand. I'll be working as a nutrition specialist.
That sounds like fun.
I'm excited.
Is that what your degree's in?
Thank you.
Sounds horrible.
She has problems with 3 out of the 5 supervisors, yes, she won't say which ones they are.
So no, my degree is actually in ag.
We know which one it was.
So who
How
hires
is
you?
ag business?
So it would be Larry Ferrero, who is like our extension specialist.
That would be blessed.
I got a former.
When do you start?
My last day here will be the 28th. So I'm not sure when I'll start there. It'll either be the June 1st or June 7th of this.
Down over Danny.
You will miss us.
I will. I'm really sad to
Just to be
be
fair.
We
No,
went
I'm
on
really
this
sad
side
to
of
be leaving.
the.
Did you see,
That
I took a long
last.
time.
Oh, yeah.
June
So,
3rd?
yeah. Go back. All right, everyone else?
Sorry, I need to.
There will have,
Get set up. I
there will
should.
be a new directive to Larry that all presentations from UC Davis Extension will be made by their, what's your position?
Nutritionalist.
They'll be
Nutritionalist.
presenting in front of the board a lot.
First time rounder.
Okay.
All right, we're all set?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, mic's on. Give me 1 sec.
I might point it off in different line
Mics are on.
Okay. Video on?
Yes.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the May 18th Trinity County Board of Supervisors meeting. If you have any Zoom trouble, please use your chat function to address it. Otherwise, all public comment will be made by the raise hand function. Could Supervisor Gogan lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Good night.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you very much. All right. That presentation, Richard, was that going to go before public comment or after?
Whenever you work with them, you just said there's a time frame. If not, I'd rather do public comment, but
I believe we can do public comment first.
All right, then we will just quickly go into public comment. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. And is there anybody wishing to make public comment on Zoom?
Yes, we have Adrian Keys.
All right. Adrian, please.
Hey, thank you, and good morning. It's Adrian Keys from the AFWORK. Thank you, Chair and staff and everybody for allowing us this opportunity. First off, I have a couple of things. I would like to request that the Chair agendize an extension of the urgency ordinance at the soonest possible date to make sure that the county has time to implement an effective transition plan to get our provisional licenses into annual status. I'm sure you probably all know that along with Senate Bill 59, there's now activity in the governor's trailer bill to extend the provisional deadline for transition to annuals. If more information is needed by the county, I would request again, if it hasn't happened yet, to please contact Crystal D'Souza, Richard Parrott, and Leslie Rains and ask them to present possibly at a board meeting so that the whole story can be had in public, or at least to try and contact them to get the information necessary to have an educated position on this topic. I know also that the governor's office and Nicole Elliott aren't really willing to take positions on regulation and legislation, so it wouldn't be effective to talk to them. Just as I just got this statistic yesterday, I believe it was from May 3rd, and this kind of shows the essential nature of the provisional program. At this point in California, there are 39 laboratories licensed to process or to test cannabis for contaminants and such. Of those, there are 0 that have annual licenses. So this extension is 100% essential to the entirety of the program. That 0 labs would kneecap the entire program. I'd also like to comment on Governor Newsom's California Comeback Plan. It has many things related to cannabis in it. It's quite interesting. One of them actually is to remove the provisional sunset date. Once an individual is in a provisional license, they would have to show progress to CEQA compliance, but the sunset date's actually removed in this language. It also provides, I believe, up to $100 million in grant money to local jurisdictions to aid in staffing and whatnot to aid in the transition process. Also allocates $9 million to incentivize outdoor growers to participate in data collection and in the future participate in stewardship programs. There's a whole bunch of equity money available in there to counties that have an equity ordinance, so let's please get that developed. And I would really also like to see the retail ordinance come up as soon as possible so the county can avail themselves of the potential tax money from that. And that's my 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. Regarding the equity grant isn't something that, it's my understanding at least, that we do not come up with ourselves, but the entity that does the study and the interviews and the public outreach, that they come up with recommendations and we review it. That's my understanding of that. Emma, is there more public comment?
Yes, Anna Wright.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good morning, Supervisors. Thank you for my time on this call. I wanted to just make everyone aware that on Friday morning last week, there was a licensed farm that was once again raided by the Trinity County Sheriffs. In my 4 years now doing consulting and being here in this community, this is now the 4th farmer, 3rd of my clients, but 4th farmer overall that has had this issue of valid state license, in metric, everything in compliance on the county's end, and confusion somewhere between the department and the sheriff's office. This is something that is going to start pushing people away from our community if licensed farmers cannot feel the safety that they so deserve. They're going to lose workers over this. They're going to lose a season potentially over this, over maybe some sort of mix-up. We're not quite sure yet. I do commend the sheriff's office and the supervisor in this district for working with us on this, but bottom line is this should never happen. If we're going to be doing code compliance and we're going to be using the funds to regulate our program, we should be doing so in a civilized manner. We should not be using funds to gather search warrants on shaky probable cause and taking teens out of ground on a licensed farm. It's ridiculous and it's disgusting, and something that unfortunately consultants have to deal with as the really middleman and representatives of these licensed individuals. I do want to make a comment that we only deal with licensed farmers. There's been some rumor out there that this was an illegal farm, and it definitely was not. So less about just this case in particular and more about the concern that it's only May 18th and we already have 1 raid on a licensed farm. I really do ask the supervisors to make sure that they work diligently to ensure the planning department communicates appropriately and with the correct answers to the sheriff's department so that we don't see any more of this happening, because that's just additional liability on the county going after people who have paid their $6,000, maybe paid even more to transfer licenses, all good in metric, and this still happens to them. So this is still a really live concern that's been going on the entirety of this program. Unfortunately, it has not stopped. And I do ask the supervisors to please be diligent for those in your district that this does not happen to them again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your comments. Anybody else on that?
I have no other raised hands and no chats.
All right. With that, we'll go into presentations, and I believe we're going to skip to item 1.2 first. Receive a presentation from the U.S. Forest Service regarding the Trinity Pines community cleanup, and pursuant to county fee waiver policy, finds that the U.S. Forest Service community cleanup provides a benefit to the public and is not for the purpose of fundraising, and approve the U.S. Forest Service application for waiver of county fees, solid waste fees, in an unknown amount, potential loss of revenue in an unknown amount to the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. And Richard, you are the contact on this, but I believe someone is also on Zoom. Maybe? There we go. Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Chris Losi. I'm the district ranger in Hayfork. I've been in this position for about a year. I'll mention that I'm with Logan Brown right now. He's our law enforcement on the South Fork Management Unit, which covers Hayfork, Latina, everything South County, up until South Fork Mountain. So I've been in this role for about a year now, and one of the things that came to my attention early on was the prevalence of illegal dumping around the district, and with definitely a concentration around the community of Post Mountain. You know, this is a real concern to us. You know, both from an environmental and a social perspective. You know, we know that the trash gets in the waterways. We know that the trash can impact our water quality. At the same time, it changes the quality of the experience. It just makes recreating on the national forest a lot less desirable. It puts a bad name to the South Fork Management Unit. So early on, I was approached about an effort to do some cleanup, and we actually approved a cleanup day last August. But as most of us remember, something else was going on last August, and so all resources went to fight the August complex. But this spring we tried again, and Logan and I made a pitch to get a small sum of money dedicated to the cleanup. And you know, for those of you who may not, for those of the people listening who may not have a lot of experience in government, you know, you may say, well, the Forest Service has a lot of money. But we don't have a lot of money for cleanup, and we aren't generally budgeted money for cleanup. And so it was a real success that we were able to get some funds for cleanup, a couple $1,000s. And actually Dan Frazier was part of that, and I appreciate that. So with that, we've decided to put together a cleanup day on next Tuesday, May 25th. We're going to be meeting in Post Mountain at Four Corners. Anyone's welcome to join. We will sign you up, but we have already over 50 and probably closer to 100 volunteers, including Forest Service employees who've agreed to help out on their day. We got between 50 and 100, probably closer to 100 folks. Over 50 Forest Service. We've got about a dozen folks from the Hayfork Watershed Center, and the Post Mountain Fire Department, Volunteer Fire Department, has agreed to put together a group of local folks to help out. In addition to personnel, we were able to get our hands on some equipment. We've got ourselves a dozer, an excavator, possibly a dump truck, several dump trailers, and we're going to be renting some dumpsters from the county. All this to say that we've got a lot of folks and we've got a lot of equipment, but one of the bottlenecks we think is going to be the dump fees. We don't know exactly how much we're going to take out. One estimate's about 200 yards of trash, and you know, the more that we dump, the more that generally we have to pay, and we have a lot of people that are really interested in helping out, and so that's why I'm coming to you asking for a waiver of dump fees on the 25th in both Hayfork and Weaverville, because we recognize there's going to be a lot of trash, and we're going to want to bring some of it to Weaverville as well, so as not to overwhelm the Hayfork dump. It could be a waiver for everybody, or it could be a waiver just for us. We would just ask that if it's just for us, that we could stage somebody at one of the dumps to kind of radio in folks, because we're likely going to be having folks at different pickups bringing in trash. And we're really looking forward to it. I think we can make a big dent in the trash. We're not going to get it all gone. We're not going to remove all the trash on the South Fork. We expect to be able to clean up a couple of these dump sites. And then we're going to work hard to keep those dump sites from becoming dump sites again. And I would definitely be interested in speaking with you after this to talk about what we can do to prevent future dumping. One of the things I noticed when I was talking to folks was that the solid waste department won't deliver a dumpster to the Post Mountain area. Even with our folks there, they won't deliver a dumpster there. Now we're able to work around that. That won't be a problem. But these are some of the things that maybe we can have a discussion about and how we can try to reduce the trash problem in the future. But right now, I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Thank you, Supervisor Frazier. And we will be out there, rain or shine, working on cleaning up the trash next Tuesday. And your help would certainly be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Chris, I have a question for you. Myself and Dan met with the president of the Hmong Association from Hayfork and the Pines last week, and they are very, very interested in helping on the 25th. Can they use their own vehicles? Will they get a waiver from the dumps? And is there any special type of waiver they may need to sign to help out? And there seems to be quite a few of them that would like to help, probably dozens.
Yes, that would be great. And I'm sorry, I can't see who's speaking.
Liam Goodman, District 3.
Oh, thank you, Supervisor Goodman. Yes, we've spoken about this in general as well. So yes, they will be able to help. We ask that if they are pulling trash that day, that they sign a volunteer agreement, and that allow them to, and that they follow our safety rules. One of the things that, the more that I think about having a lot of folks out there with a lot of heavy equipment, is that we need to be very safe. And if we're going to have volunteers, they need to be able to follow safety protocols and stay out of the way of equipment. The other question was, the waiver. Well, the waiver is up to you, right? The waiver from fees is up to you. But if you do grant that waiver, we would ask that it be for anyone who's hauling trash that day, and we would be able to coordinate so that we could flag those vehicles, label them, do something to make it clear that they're helping out the effort. And I'm not sure if there was a third question. I may have forgotten that.
Is there any special attire they have to wear? Anything above and beyond normal?
They should probably wear hard hats, right? Do we? Yeah, that's a good. We'll have to get back to you on that. That's a really good question.
The recommendation would be gloves, long sleeves, boots, work gloves. I mean, it's basically household trash out there. Anything hazardous, batteries that, the typical dump rules, we're gonna deal with that. We'll be sitting the tires and the batteries and anything like that off to the side. It's all gonna be household stuff. We're aware of no organic material, material going into the dump, so it's all gonna be skookum. So there shouldn't be anything to worry about other than, where the stuff that's gonna keep you safe from just picking up household trash off the ground.
And the waivers? The waivers will be there the day that they go on Tuesday. The waivers will be there for them.
Affirmative. We'll have a table set up with a little agreement. Everybody can come sign, and there'll be like a formal briefing, like Chris said, at 8 o'clock, and we'll go over like the distribution, how it's going to work out, so that way it's not a complete rodeo, that it's an organized fashion.
I believe it'll be 9:30 actually. Just we had a discussion as a firefighters. We'll be starting at 9:30.
Hey, Chris, it's Jill. I'm looking at the picture that you provided in the board packet, and I'm seeing what looks like a RV. Do you have a plan to get rid of that size of garbage?
So as far as cars and trailers go right now, I'll be using the 180 process with, on the law enforcement side of that. The 25th is going to be specific to the household trash and the stuff that's getting scattered amongst the forest and down in everybody's waterways and stuff. So that day, no, we are in the process of moving that, getting that stuff moved, though. It just won't be that day.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions? All right, I guess that's it. Unless you guys have anything else to say, we appreciate your time and efforts. It means a lot.
Chair, we are asking that you consider the fee waiver on this, so we will need a motion.
I would motion to,
I have a question on that too. If we're going to consider the fee waiver, do we need to open this up to public comment?
All right, then we can go into public comment on this item.
I have no raised hands and no chats.
All right, thank you, Emma. Is there any further discussion from the board?
I would ask the board that for the fee waiver that there is, he did mention that there is some, if they're using private vehicles, there is some type of identification that they're participating in the project.
Okay, does Diane need to speak to this or anything like that?
Just in the motion that it's clear that those that are participating with their private vehicles receive some type of sticker notification or something on the vehicle that indicates that they're participating in this particular project, so we don't get people just having a free day at the dump, where this is specific for this cleanup.
So I don't know if the Forest Service is still listening, if you're still listening, but if you guys have a mechanism to essentially tag a vehicle that has a load going out, kind of with I don't know, like a Christmas tree tag or something of that nature?
So we'll probably just use the same kind of process with a known code that day that they use on fires, where you see the paint in the window that says your equipment row number like they do on fires. We'll probably just give everybody a little chalk mark in their window with the code for that day, so it's not known prior to then, and then every vehicle will have the same mark, so we know who's who in the zoo.
All right, thank you. Richard, is that?
Works for me, thank you.
Okay. All right, any additional questions or discussion from the board?
Do you guys want to make a motion, or?
I'll make a motion that we approve the fee waiver for the cleanup on the 25th for the National Forest and identified vehicles.
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion from Supervisor Frazier and a second from Supervisor Gogan. Emma, please pull the board.
Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
yes.
Supervisor Frazier?
Yes.
Supervisor Grove?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Again, thanks so much for the cleanup efforts. In the short term, I think it's very beneficial. In the long term, obviously, we need a better solution. So we'll go back to item 1.1, receive a presentation from U.S. Forest Service Forest Supervisor Ted MacArthur regarding the U.S. Capitol Christmas Tree Project. No fiscal impact. And Supervisor Ted MacArthur, are you on the Zoom call?
I am.
All right, floor is yours.
All right, thank you, honorable board members. I really appreciate the time to speak to you today, and also I can't help but say I'm excited about the cleanup around Post Mountain. That's going to be a great project. Let me see if I can get my screen share going today. Is that working? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to just go over today is to highlight that the Six Rivers National Forest was selected to provide the U.S. Capitol Christmas tree for 2022, so this coming December. I know it's a little bit early to be talking about Christmas, but as I'm finding out, this is a very, it takes a lot to provide the Capitol Christmas tree. And I wanted to just make the board aware of this effort and invite your participation. I'm not asking for anything specific today, just wanting you to be aware of it and really see how Trinity County might be interested in engaging in the events that are coming up. Just a little bit of background. We'll be providing one tree for the Capitol, the People's Tree. It will be about an 85 foot tree. We're going to try to get as big a tree as possible that we can fit on a trailer and ship across country. We'll also be providing about 100 companion trees that are, most of them are going to be around 6 foot tall, but some will be a little bit larger as well to go to different offices there in Washington, D.C. In conjunction with that, we'll be providing ornaments for all the trees, tree skirts. Leading up to the event, we'll be.
Ed, you're not in presentation mode. We can't see the slides progressing. Over.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can fix that. Can you really see the picture, the logo there?
We can here at the boardroom.
Okay, great, thanks. So anyway, it's what we're going to try to do is several local events that can help provide opportunities for people to create ornaments, to create tree skirts. And our overall goal, and well, before I get there, as part of delivering the tree, there will be several events. The tree is going to be selected from the 6 rivers. We don't know exactly where. We're looking for candidate trees now. The Office of the Architect of the Capitol will come out in June and select a primary and a secondary tree. So it may or may not be coming from Trinity County. We do have some candidate trees that are identified in Trinity, Humboldt, and Del Norte counties. We'll definitely be following up as we know where the tree more specifically is going to be coming from. And we're going to be trying to have events throughout the forest and communities, regardless of where it comes from. We'll plan on taking about 22 days to get the tree from here to Washington, D.C. About half the time is going to be in California and half the time is going to be crossing the country. And each of these stops along the way, what we're really going to try to do is highlight what's unique about the 6 Rivers National Forest and the communities in and around the 6 Rivers. We're pretty excited about being able to demonstrate what is special about this part of California and why we're such an important place and why people should learn a little bit more about what we have out here. And part of that is we tried to capture that in our logo. As you see, it's 6 rivers, many peoples, one tree, and that's trying to capture that there's a lot of people that are represented that live in this part of the world. People in the background are a variety of colors and capabilities. We have mountains that are supposed to were designed to represent the mountains that we have in our area. We couldn't get 6 rivers in the logo very well, so there's 6 different colors in the one river to represent 6 rivers. And then also on the tree there are, I believe, 119 ornaments or lights representing all the different tribes that are in California. And then the 16 red lights are representing the tribes that are located in our part of the world. And it's, again, just highlighting just some of the aspects of how unique our part of the world is. And then also is highlighted the Lassic lupin, which is an endemic species here, pretty special. And then the acorns that are also pretty important to the indigenous folks of the area, staple species. Let's see if I can progress down a little bit. And just a little bit for the calendar of events here. We recently sent out a call for ornaments and skirts. That sent was a press release that went out, statewide, and we are looking at getting several kind of local events set up where people can create ornaments, kind of come together and celebrate again our part of the world and put things put ornaments together that help represent this part of this part of the country. The tree is going to be harvested in October, and the cross-country tour is going to start the end of October. And as I mentioned, that's going to be almost a month-long trip, and then we'll deliver the tree on November 19th, the U.S. Capitol, and then it'll be prepped for the lighting of the tree. There'll be several events back east, and then the tree will be lighted, hosted by the Speaker of the House on December 1st. So that's just a quick overview of making you aware of what's coming up, and just want to make sure you were informed, and would open up any questions you might have about this event and how you might want to participate or would like us to engage with Trinity County in our preparations.
Supervisors, any questions? Go ahead.
Ted, it's Jill. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a quick question because this all looks really imminent, but I heard you say December of 22. Are we talking 21 or are we planning a year out?
Thanks for catching that. No, it's 21. It's this year. So we're starting events now. Thanks for catching that.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? Ted, it was discussed if we should send a burned tree, the symbolic burned tree. You have any opinion on that?
Well, not for the Capitol tree. I don't know that that would go over well, but I think it's definitely worth highlighting. I think that is going to be part of our messaging and part of how we communicate about the area.
Maybe there's a tree where the bottom's been slightly burned or charred, but the top survived, so it's resilient and determined and all that, and then we can cut it down and send it up.
I appreciate that sentiment, though I anticipate the architect of the Capitol, who is the one that picks the tree, would probably not select that one. But again, I do think it provides us a really interesting platform, and that's what I'm pretty excited about, is how we talk about what the challenges and opportunities and what we're working through in this part of the country. And I absolutely think highlighting the devastating fires and forest health and fire management is absolutely a part of how we want to talk about the Six Rivers and the communities around the Six Rivers.
All right, well, thanks for entertaining that idea, Ted. Are you guys going to be doing a lot of social media activity on this through your own streams?
Yes, we are. In fact, we're in the process of developing Six Rivers, Six Questions. It's a kind of a video blog. We're going to be visiting, doing interviews with a variety of folks across the forest and community members, and those will be posted. And there'll be a lot of different initiatives and events that we're going to try to capitalize on getting people's interest and highlighting that. Again, it's early. We want people to be thinking about Christmas all year in Trinity County and Humboldt, Delaware counties this year as we prepare for this. It's a unique chance. The trees only come from California 5 times in the last almost 50 years, and this is the first time it's come from the Six Rivers National Forest. So we'll be getting the spotlight in a way that we haven't in the past.
Oh, that's really neat. And I know the county here, we just started a social media position. Isn't that right, Richard?
Yes, part of our tree department.
So maybe we can collaborate with our social media and your social media and try to maximize the exposure and highlight the process as we lead up to it.
You know, that'd be fantastic. We actually have a team. If you have a contact for me, I'll get our team lead to reach out and we can coordinate those efforts. We have about 20 folks kind of working in different aspects of this, and we do have 2 or 3 that are just focused on outreach and communications with the public, and we'll be bringing more folks on here in the near future. So we'd absolutely love to coordinate with you.
All right, thank you, Ted. Any additional questions from the board?
Yeah, Ted said a new thing, the home of Bigfoot. Are you taking them with you or leaving them here?
So when you get one of these logos, you'll have to look at it. So Bigfoot is in the logo. You have to find it. But yes, we will absolutely be highlighting that Bigfoot is helping us deliver the tree.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for your time and presentation. That's really exciting. And we will move on now to the consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters and will be acted upon by the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Supervisors, are there any items wishing to be pulled?
Yes, I'm going to pull 2.4.
2.4. Anyone else?
2.6.
2.6. All right. Are those the only items to be pulled in? If so, yeah.
I'll move to accept consent calendar minus 2.4 and minus 2.6.
All right. I'll go ahead and second that. And I've got a second from myself and a motion from Supervisor Groves.
Supervisor Brown, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. So item 2.4, clerk of the board, find no objection to the issuance of a daily alcoholic beverage license to the Weaverville Lions Club to serve alcoholic beverages at their Independence Day celebration to be held at Loden Park in Weaverville, California on July 1st through the 4th of 2021. No fiscal impact. Supervisor Groves.
I have a conflict of interest with the alcohol license of this and my own license, so I will recuse from this item.
All right, thank you very much. That is your personal pleasure.
Do you have
The conflict is that these alcohol can be served at the event. All right, is there any additional questions or comments for item 2.4 from the board?
I would make a motion when we approve item 2.4.
Second.
All right. Margaret, do you have to take public comment on this?
Yes.
Frazier, you should remind me. Any public comment on this item? All
I
right.
have no raised hands and no chats.
All right. And then we have a second and a motion. Please pull the board.
Motion by Supervisor Frazier, second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Gogan?
Yes.
Oh, Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Sorry, I skipped you. Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next will be item 2.6. Ratify the chairman's signature on the letter supporting Trinity Public Utilities District and Western Area Power Administration proposal in response to the Forestry Legacy and Forest Health Research Grant Projects. No fiscal impact. Richard.
Happy to answer any questions.
The main reason I pulled this, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me about the RAP program, and I just wanted to highlight the word supporting the grant funding, not necessarily approving the EIR or anything of the RAP program, that this is just a funding opportunity and that we're not pushing this whole RAP program through without public comment. I just wanted to make sure that that was understood before we move forward with this.
Yes, that's correct. We're just supporting the application for the grant funding for TPUD.
All right, any additional questions? And is there any public comment on this item, Emma?
I have no raised hands and no chats.
All right, I'm going to get a motion.
Motion to provide 2.6.
All right,
I'll second.
all right. Emma, we have a motion and a second. Please pull the board.
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Bilgin. Supervisor Bilgin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. All right, well, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we'll go ahead and go into our 10 a.m. public hearings. Oh, we cannot? Oh, my
Go to the
goodness.
calendar.
All right,
Yeah.
so can we go to reports and announcements or county matters?
Reports and announcements.
All right, reports and announcements. 4.1, item 1, report from department heads. Any department heads on Zoom wishing to report out?
Liz Hamilton.
Liz, go ahead.
Good morning, Liz Hamilton, Health and Human Services Director. I have a brief COVID report out on behalf of our Public Health Department. Currently, we have 3 active cases and 2 active quarantines. We have a vaccine and distribution, our pod tomorrow in Hayfork from 9:30 to 12 at the Trinity County Fairgrounds on Highway 3. We will be offering both Moderna and Janssen vaccines, and you can register at myturn.ca.gov. As you may have heard, there is an expanded EUA on Pfizer vaccine now being offered for youth 12 to 15 years of age with parent consent. Our current county vaccination numbers, so we have 3,455 fully vaccinated residents and 1,055 partially vaccinated residents, so it's about 37–38%. The state secretary, Dr. Galley, announced yesterday that although CDC has updated their masking guidance, California does not plan on modifying their masking guidance until June 15th, when they plan to fully reopen the economy. So as of May 3rd, face coverings are not required outdoors. However, they continue to be required indoors. End of report. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Any additional department heads wishing to report out?
Morning, Rick Tippett, Director of Transportation. The good news, the jail is about 3 days out from being done for the construction of the unit itself. Now we move away from the contractor's work and we move on to having the wiring put in, the furniture, and all those things installed. But the building is pretty much essentially 100% complete, and we're ready to work with the fire marshal to get occupancy, which we're hoping either later this week or next week. And big news, the flagpole got withstood on Friday, so now we have the flag out there, and looks like we're all just about ready to put in the final bells and whistles and turn it over to the sheriff, and they would take it from there. So quite exciting that we're just about done with that. On to other news. We last week or 2 weeks ago, we started talking to Butte County about how they went around estimating their tree removal costs, because we had some concerns about the way we were estimating tree removal. And we have to revise our tree removal costs from $7 million to $100 million. There's about 56,000 trees, road hazard trees that need to be removed within the road prism. And so we ran, being that we got that initial cost of $104 million, it was, quite honestly, it was a very, it was a shocker. So we went back and we applied it to GPS, to the burn zones that we have already established to that we had picked up through the BEAR reports. And we applied it through GIS, looking at the roads that are affected by the fire that are owned by the county. We have 87 miles of road. And so we went back through and looked at the burn severities, matched it up, and we still came up with about $100 million worth of tree removal that is required. I made Supervisor or Chair Brown is aware of this. Shared a letter with him the other day. We have requested that Cal OES step in and match 100% of that work, and that they step in and actually help us, because the amount of that work is very, very much overwhelming to our department, because it's just, as you can imagine, it's a huge amount. We have been receiving kind of hints off and on that the Forest Service might also step in, since about 80% of the roads that are within this section are owned by the Forest Service. Or the road is, the underlying property is owned by the Forest Service, but the county has a 200-foot easement over the Forest Service road so that we can operate the highway. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Rick, did you get, the last meeting, the Caltrans rep here was going to send you a schedule for the Swift Creek Bridge. Has he sent that to you yet?
No, I have not seen it. I'll ask him again today.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the board? All right, thanks, Rick. I think that's all.
Thank you.
Are there any additional department heads wishing to report out? All right, seeing none, Dr. Coons, do you have anything to report out on?
No, nothing new to report, thank you.
All right, Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Frazier.
I had a few meetings that I attended. I know Liam and I met with the Hayfork Long New Year Committee in Hayfork on Friday to discuss how we could interact with the Hmong community around Hayfork, Foot Mountain, Trinity County in general. It went well. So I also went to the Ruth Lake Community Services District meeting. They had expressed concerns about rebuilding around Ruth Lake. It's still a disaster zone up there. I went to a Post Mountain PUD meeting, mainly to discuss the cleanup effort on the 25th. And I'm sure that I have forgot something.
All right. Supervisor Gilligan.
I went to a Fish and Game Commission meeting last week where I found out that approximately 90% of the out-migrating wild Chinook salmon on the Trinity down the screw traps by Hoopa, Witchbeck, have a disease called C. shasta, which will probably kill mostly all of those, which is not a good thing. So right now we are in the stage of thinking about, we normally have release of our hatchery Chinook here in about 2 weeks. So we're wondering if we should let those go and maybe make them susceptible to C. shasta or not. So it's something that we're thinking about now. I went on a flight over the Alps last week, looking at the wilderness, some of the wilderness plan. I was also at the Hmong meeting, PSA 2 earlier in the week, and then I was at a TCAA meeting with Joe Morio, who went over the metrics, scale use inspection, and calibration of the scales, which will be important to our county, as is the way that we figure out how many pounds go through our county, which is our tax, is the way we tax our cannabis in this county. So Joe gave a great performance there, and everything looked good. That's it for me.
All right. Supervisor Cox.
Yes. At that PSA 2 meeting that Liam and I were on, we were made aware that 3 positions for the advisory council from Trinity are needed. So I don't know what the process is by which those could be filled, but making folks aware. PATH meeting was amazing. So if you are not aware of what that stands for, it's Partnership in Action for Trinity Health. And these folks work really hard. It's impressive to me to watch what they do. They've done some incredible work looking at some really important data from our 7th through 12th graders over the last 10 years. I was really interested in that data and anxious to see how they utilize these findings to create some really meaningful help. Town hall meeting was awesome. Our local ranger, Terry Jones, was there with all those bullet points that you probably saw in the paper, or you could have looked at them on the website. If you would like to go back and revisit that, I'll post that link soon. And so then for June, we'll have PUD's General Manager, Paul Hooser, presenting on PUD's right-of-way expansion. And then the last thing is fun. Emma's got some great photos. I was out at East Weaver Creek Campground on Saturday. So there is a picture of, not all, but some of our search and rescue team. They were out for a training. The program, which is administered by Under Sheriff Ward, is assisted by Sergeant Will Oliver. They have rebuilt this program that had dropped down to about 8 members, and they're up to almost 60. Only $20,000 of what's needed to support them comes from the general fund, and the rest of it comes from grants and donations. So these photos were taken on day 1 of a 2-day training that was put on by our local PA, Michael Novak, and that's interesting all in itself. He's got more energy than, he's got a lot. It's impressive and exciting and really keeps everybody engaged and learning what they need to know. I also will be down at the Swift Water training at Pigeon Point on June 12th. That's going to be a 2-day training. So excited to see what goes on there. Yep, she got 3 pictures. So, and they ran, scenarios. This is real, and if you're out in the wilderness, and this is what your person needs, here's how you do it. So just want to give a shout out and say thank you. This is not only important for the people of our county who want to use our beautiful outdoors, but also as we look to expanding our local economy by inviting people from the outside in. It's just really important for them to know that they're going to have that backup, and we've got great people trained and ready to help. So thank you to them.
Well done.
Yeah, I had meetings with SPI and the Forest Service separately, but over the same issue, and this is the transfer that SPI is doing that eventually will go into Forest Service hands. If you recall, we sent in a letter of support, that within that letter I asked that Trinity County have say in what becomes wilderness out of that, and the Forest Service is moving up their end of that bargain. And so we were discussing on which sections could possibly go into wilderness. Invited several people from Trinity County, and they had several people, including that Wilderness Society, which we discussed those issues. SPI also has assured me that they are not in the divesting themselves of property in Trinity County. This was very low quality timberland that they felt that would have a better and higher use to be into recreation hands, that they are committed to their forestry practices and actually getting more land in Trinity County. Also, that we were unable to be on the TMC call because we were in a strategic planning mode. But I think one important number that came out of that meeting was that the Bureau is estimating a total of 330 million acre feet, not million, 330,000 acre feet going into the Trinity Lake drainage for the total year, which on a normal year we're around 1 million, so that puts us about 30% of inflow into the lake. And anybody that's seen the lake is not surprised by that number. And they have not announced how much they're going to send over the hill. You know, it's going to go down the river, but we don't know how much it's going to go over the hill. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. I have nothing to report on myself. So I will go ahead and take a break on the meeting, and we will return at 10 o'clock for our public hearings. Thank you.
Yeah, that was going the other way.
Richard must be burning up about that.
Dying over here now.
It is loud. It's not being employed.
Let me know. Yeah, I'm ready.
Liam, do you want to put your mask on so I don't turn the video back on?
That is
You know what, since it's your last week, it's to you.
Not yet, but I didn't want to hold that. Is that right?
Okay, you're last.
All right, we are back at the Trinity County Board of Supervisors meeting, and we are opening up our 10 a.m. public hearings with grants, item 3.1. Conduct a public hearing to consider adopting a resolution which authorizes the county administrative officer to submit a grant application for funding from the 2020 to 2021 state CDBG funding program and authorizes the CAO and/or grants coordinator to sign any grants agreements, amendables, or other documents necessary to, if awarded. No fiscal impacts to general fund. Potential revenue to the grants department in the amount of $1 million for public ambulance services and economic development for small businesses. And probably Susie is online.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to discuss with you one of my favorite topics, the community development block grant funding. In particular today, I'm here to discuss the 2021 Notice of Funding Availability. This year there have been a couple of changes. We cannot submit applications for public infrastructure, which has been one of the service buckets for years. They're oversubscribed, and so we have no applications to submit for that this year. They're still trying to catch up from last year. So for Trinity County, we've anticipated the need for some funding for public services at the Southern Trinity Area Rescue. We can submit an application up to $500,000 for a 3-year period, which would just about cover the annual cost for a 3-year period for the ambulance service in Southern Trinity. And then also the potential to max out the opportunity for economic development for small businesses in the amount of $500,000. That $500,000 would go to micro enterprise and business assistance businesses, meaning anywhere from 10 to fewer employees, through a loan program that we still have the opportunity to design. It remains to be seen if that program can be forgivable loans or not. There were some waivers around CDBG COVID funding that have not presented themselves, so that might actually be a loan program versus a forgivable loan or grant program. So today I'm here to conduct a public hearing to gather public input on those two activities, and the requirement for public input is a threshold criteria. So we are required to do that in a public hearing. And so I'm here to answer questions about these two activities and gather input from others.
All right, thank you, Susie. Is there any questions from the board? Okay. Emma, is there any public comment on this?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay. Board, are you sure you have no questions, comments? If not, then we would be entertaining a motion, I believe.
I will move to accept 3.1 as presented.
Second.
All right. Emma, we have a motion from Supervisor Grove, a second from Supervisor Cox. Please pull the board.
Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, we will now go into planning and zoning. Item 3.2, conduct a public hearing to uphold, modify, or overturn the Planning Commission's March 11, 2021 decision to approve a variance request to reduce the required 20-foot rear setback for the property located at 101 Lakeview Drive, Trinity Center, California. Project applicant Tim and Karen Lorenzo, variance 20-01. Appellant Scott and Angie Joseph. No fiscal impact. I believe both parties are here. Is that correct? All right. Margaret, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the appellant has the first opportunity to speak, and then or you go ahead and explain the process.
Thank you. So the process will take place that they will be, anyone who will be talking or testifying will be sworn in. Staff will then present a brief introduction of the case. The appellant will have an opportunity to speak. Then anyone in response will have an opportunity to speak. Then it will open up to public comment. Then the hearing will close and it will return back to the board.
All right, thank you for that. Lisa, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman Brown, members of the board, Lisa Lozier, Deputy Director of Planning, and I will be presenting for you Agenda Item 3.2, which is appeal of the Planning Commission's decision or a request to appeal the Planning Commission's approval of Variance VAR 20-01, and that is for, the request is for approval of a zero-line setback, which would be, the typical setback would be 20 feet from the rear of the property. So in summary, Scott and Angie Joseph have filed an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to approve variance VAR 20-01 for Tim and Karen Lorenzo, which would reduce a 20-foot rear yard setback to a zero-line setback for the construction of an airplane hangar and to allow direct access to the Trinity Center Airport. So the airport, or the hangar, is proposed to be built in ground. It is also proposed to be built in conjunction with a residence and a two-car garage that would be placed closer to the front of the property with the hangar in the back. So the appellants have raised three concerns with a reduced yard setback, and those are as follows. The applicant, they're concerned that the applicant failed to establish that they would suffer a unique hardship under the general zoning regulations. They're concerned that the applicant failed to prove a need based on the specific size, shape, and topography of their parcel. And also, last, the variance provides that the applicant a special privilege which is injurious to the adjacent property owner. So those are the concerns brought up by the appellants. Staff's response to those concerns are as follows. For number one, the applicant is not asking for a special privilege to be granted for the zero-line rear setback. The same zero-line setback has been granted for other properties on Lakeview Drive, which are similar in size, shape, and topography. So, you know, that's approximately 19 properties that are on Lakeview Drive that are fairly similar in shape. Size of the lots are fairly similar. Properties more to the north have a little bit steeper topography, as there's a slope that goes from south to north that raises. And they've also requested an encroachment permit, which I have found out from the Department of Transportation is more adequately described as a through the fence permit, not an encroachment permit, which would typically be granted for access to Lakeview Drive. So I'm sorry if that was confusing for anyone. On the second concern for the appellants, the property located at 101 Lakeview Drive, and that is the project site, is a small residential lot, and it's approximately 11,400 square feet. It has access to a water system, but is required to maintain a septic system on site. So when the Lorenzos bought this piece of property, the septic system had already been installed and improved. So one of the issues that they're working with on this property is if they wish to make substantial changes to that septic system or to change the location of it, they would be required to meet today's current septic standards, which are substantially more restrictive than what was required when the septic was originally put in. So that would be potentially a constraint for them. And also, with the location being at the front and pretty severe slope at the back of the property, also constrains where they can place structures on the property. So while they're laying out, what they actually wanted to do with the property, siting the hangar at the rear of the property, of course, makes the most sense because that's where the direct access to the taxiway and ultimately to the Trinity Center Airport would be. So in order to fit all of those items on the property, they're asking for that 0-line setback, which is, as I said before, a 20-foot encroachment into the rear yard. And for the last item, the request for the 0-line setback would not be injurious to the general public or welfare or adjoining properties. And in regard to the general welfare, the applicant is going to be required to meet all standards as far as development on the property. He will be required to meet all of the California Building Code requirements as far as the construction of the property, required to meet all of the environmental health safety standards in regard to the septic, would be required to have permission for water service to the property and all of the necessary items that would be required for typical construction. So in that case, and what they're asking for, it's a residential piece of property zoned R1. So a residence is typically permitted by right. So what they're asking for is not completely out of the realm of reason. What they're asking for is the reduction of the rear yard setback to 0-line. The appellant before the Board of Supervisors, the owner of 91 Lakeview Drive, has expressed concerns that allowing the 0-line setback for the hangar would block the view from their property and would cause a disturbance and enjoyment of their property. And the hangar, in this case, the hangar is proposed to be constructed in-ground. It is the same in-ground hangar on the property that's located at 121 Lakeview Drive, which is directly to the south of the property. So basically what they're asking for is the same thing that the neighbors to the south, almost identical in construction to the neighbors in the south. So in staff's opinion, for these reasons, the variance would not be injurious to either of the adjacent properties, either to the north or the south. So department recommendation, planning staff recommends that the board deny the appeal and uphold the planning commission's action to approve the variance. And that concludes my presentation. I would be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Lisa. Supervisor Groves?
Lisa, good morning. So the property at 20 or 121, is that at a 0 setback on that hangar?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the board?
I have one. The 91 Lakeview, where it's placed, like the label on the photo, is that the house that we're seeing, or is there an extra lot in between 101 and 91?
So if you're looking at attachment 7 on the staff report, to the very right, you're going to see the label for 91, and that is the appellant's property. Then you're going to see what looks like kind of a very little forested area. That is the undeveloped lot of the applicant at 101 Lakeview Drive. And then to the very left of that, at 121 Lakeview Drive, that is a constructed lot, and that shows the hangar at the 0-line setback, which is the same request as the applicant for the variance.
So, thank you. So my question is, everything that's undeveloped is 101?
That's correct.
Okay.
Additional questions? Supervisor Frazier, Supervisor Yogan? All right. I think that's it for questions, Lisa, thank you. And then, Margaret, who's going to do the swearing in?
That would be
All right. And the appellant goes first, is that right, or the?
And again, only those that are providing testimony, so that obviously the representatives do not need to be sworn in.
All right. So, Scott and Angie, are you guys wanting to make testimony?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so step up and then we'll swear you in and then you'll have your moment to speak.
Okay, so if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear or affirm
I swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give
that the testimony I'm about to give
in this matter is the truth.
in this matter is the truth.
Thank you.
All right, the floor is yours.
I would like the opportunity, my attorney recently had a newborn baby, and I would like the opportunity when I'm done speaking or in a rebuttal that he gets a chance to speak also.
On the Zoom function?
He's on a Zoom right now.
Yeah, that should be fine.
So thank you for hearing this. I want to respond. I want to clarify a couple things that may not be clear. There are 19 properties on the runway. There are only 2 that have a setback caused by the hangar itself. The rest of the properties fall within the legal setback, including mine. So it was presented that there were other properties. The property direct, so I live at 91. They're building the lot next to me. And then the following lot, they have a 0 setback also. It was approved in 1968. Mr. and Mrs. Lorenzo purchased their lot from that owner of that property. So they're not contesting it because they sold them the lot. So there's only 2 of the 19 properties that fall within the setback area with a hangar. So if you look at the plans that Mr. Lorenzo provided Mrs. Lozier, the home that they're proposing is nearly 1,000 feet smaller than mine, with a hangar that's only about half the size of mine. Yet my house has the same size lot and a 2-car garage and falls within the correct setbacks without asking for a variance, and was built in 1968. There is no need on this property for them to do what they're asking to do. What all of the other homes that have a hangar on the property have done is they've pushed half of the hangar underneath the house, which would be a great solution for them. I don't understand why they're not doing that. By them so Mrs. Lozier has identified that the hangar is an in-ground hangar, and I don't disagree completely with that. The hangar is being built in the ground, but it's going to extend up beyond the ground 4 feet. And part of that, so the Lorenzos, I have pictures before, I bought my property 10 months ago. And I took a lot of pictures of that. I also tried to buy the lot next to us that the Lorenzos purchased. So I have a lot of pictures of the lot. What they've done is they've raised that property height over 2 feet so far. They brought in dirt, or they've dug the hole for the hangar and they've taken that dirt and elevated the height. So basically what they're doing is they're raising, it's an in-ground hangar, but by the time they put handrails on it, it's going to stick out approximately 7 feet out of the ground. They're extending their hangar almost from me to you guys. Beyond, that's about 20 feet to the beginning of the desk right here. They're extending their deck and 20 feet past mine, which is going to completely block my view to the south. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? 20 feet is approximately here to the beginning of that desk. Theirs is going to stick out, and it's going to stick up approximately 7 feet with the handrails above grade. It would be like putting a fence there blocking my view. All of the other neighbors have built within the setbacks except for 2. The one that they bought, the neighbors that they bought the property from, and then another one to the south of us. I want to read something, and my concern is I reached out. I tried to negotiate after the variance. So the Lorenzos asked for a 13-foot, and the Planning Commission issued them an allowance to build. One of the conditions was they could build up to 13 feet tall. And that's the condition of the variance. Mr. Lorenzo then sent plans to Mrs. Lozier and identified that the front of the hangar would be 13 feet, but it would have a 1/4 inch slope on it. So the back of the hangar would be almost 13'9". It may seem minimal, but when you're talking about a view where I spent almost $1 million buying a house and improving it, a foot makes a difference when we're talking about 20 feet of my view. So his plans identify 13'9" at the end of the hangar and 13'5½ at the setback. I tried to extend the olive branch to Mr. Lorenzo yesterday or 2 days ago and say I would drop this whole thing if he would follow a couple conditions, which I tried to negotiate with Mrs. Lozier. I identified that no part I requested, I don't want my view blocked at all. I've contested this, and I believe that it's a financial loss to me to have my view blocked. But I reached out and said, I don't want to be on bad terms with neighbors. Mr. Lorenzo and I, we both bought our properties about the same time. We started off having a friendly neighborly relationship. And then it turned, and I want to read you some text messages that went back and forth. And one of the reasons the relationship has turned. I'll read those right now. So I received the variance from the Trinity County Planning Commission. I didn't know what it was for. I reached out to Mr. Lorenzo, and I can show you the text messages. I printed these off my phone. These are directly from Mr. Lorenzo and I going back. This is dated January 30th at 1:40 in the afternoon, the day I received the variance request. This is me. I just received a notice of a public hearing on a variance at your house, or for your house. It doesn't say what you're asking for. Are you trying to get the setback modified? He says, yes, CAL FIRE made everything 30 feet from the property lines, and we just have to go through the hoops for the variance. The rumor in town, because the 6 other applicants were pot grows, and they assumed that I was growing pot. I responded, is that the rear setback? Is it a rear setback? He says, no, it's the side setback. So he was completely dishonest with me and said it was the side setback and not the rear setback. He said it's dumb. There are only a few small lots like it, so CAL FIRE incorporates them into everything. My knowledge, the fire department and other departments have signed off on it before it goes to the meeting. I said, how close to the property line are you wanting to build? He's being deceptive with me. And he says, on your side, 27 feet and 15 feet on the garage. I said, that should be plenty of room. I would have guessed that you were contesting the setback for the hangar. He says, no. That's what he said to me. That's how this whole thing started, and that's why I decided to contest it. So I asked him specifically, it was for the rear setback, and he said, no, it's the side setback from CAL FIRE, which is completely not the truth. So the negotiation with Mr. Lorenzo and I, through Mrs. Lozier, was the variance identifies the hangar is not to exceed 13 feet. I asked for Mrs. Lozier to confirm that, but the plans that Mr. Lorenzo provided show, I asked for her to confirm that in the setback area, nothing would exceed past 13 feet. But his plans very clearly show that it extends beyond 13 feet. I ask that if, I'm contesting this, however, if the board approves this and it doesn't agree with me, I would request that no part of the structure within the setback exceeds even 1 inch past 13 feet. It is 13'0", because that is what the Planning Commission identified, 13 feet. Not 13'5", not 13'9", 13 feet. And I reached out to Mr. Lorenzo yesterday, or 2 days ago, and offered to drop this whole thing if he would agree to those terms. I thought he was going to. I also asked, it was brought up in the Planning Commission meeting, I didn't bring this up, one of the planning board members brought up, would you be willing to accept stainless steel handrails? He said he would, but they didn't make it part of the condition of the variance. I believe they based part of their decision on the fact that it wasn't going to obstruct my view because he wanted stainless steel, or he was willing to put in stainless steel rails. I'm a general contractor. I have 65 employees. I build a lot of different things. We build over 200 decks a year, is one of the things we do. Mr. Lorenzo, I'm concerned that Mr. Lorenzo wants to put in glass. Glass would completely obstruct my view, and because I would have to look through not only the front but the side of it, and it would give a reflection. People think glass is a great alternative. It's not. It will create a glare, and it could create a glare on the runway also. I ask that you guys consider the fact that this is a hardship for me as it's blocking my view with no need to. He could very easily push the hangar halfway under the house. He's asking for a deck, I believe, to be 1,600 feet, if I'm not mistaken. An 800-foot deck should be more than enough to enjoy your view and not block mine. I have no further comments.
All right, thank you.
I know my attorney would like to speak, though, when his time is.
Would you like to have during the rebuttal or right now?
That's
if you don't mind, Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make some comments here at the top.
And Mr. Hamilton's your lawyer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. So good morning.
Hold on one moment.
Does he not have to be sworn in also?
Not an attorney,
All right, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, and good morning, members of the board. I just want to go over a couple of the legal issues here. You've obviously heard from Mr. Joseph on, sort of, his view and the things that have transpired to date. And so I want to go over really two main points of contention with the Planning Commission's decision. At the top, can I ask, we have a time limit here. I don't want to take up too much time, but I don't want to try and rush through. I had 3 minutes last time.
No, usually 5 to 10 minutes should be there.
Okay, great. I shouldn't take that much time. I just don't want to have to, try and race through it. So, in any event, as you know, Trinity County's governing statute for a variance has a number of different requirements that must be met. And, in this case, really one of the major thrusts of the statute hasn't really even been addressed. I think there was some comments on it this morning from Ms. Lozier, but those really weren't part of the application. They weren't really part of the decision. So it's kind of hard for it to be addressed now at the appeal stage when the variance was already granted on the record as it is. But I'll just sort of read to you from, and this is section 1731.010. This is your general variance code. It says, and I quote, "The statutory justification for a variance is that the owner would otherwise suffer a unique hardship under general zoning regulations because his or her parcel is different from the others to which the regulation applies due to size, shape, or topography." Okay, so we heard a little bit about that this morning, that, oh, well, his property is similar in size, and, there's these 19 homes along the runway, and so, 2 others have gotten this, this special privilege. So, why shouldn't this lot also receive it? And I don't really follow that logic, because, by that argument, essentially every lot on the runway deserves this zero lot line setback, and none of them have it, right? So I don't quite understand how, because 2 other properties have it, this property is entitled to it. So you really, and I'll let you know that, the government code 65906 is what sort of dictates that localities can enable their zoning statutes. It requires the same thing. You have to show a unique hardship, and that's not just lip service. It has to be done with evidence, okay? And the case law is clear on that if you don't produce evidence to show something unique for the property that really requires, it would be akin to saying that the Lorenzos can't build on this property unless they get that extra 20 feet. Not that they want to have it this way or that they want to build their dream house and there's some problem with the septic tanks, which was not mentioned at all in the beginning. There has to be evidence in the record that shows this property can't really be developed the way that it should be to allow for a residential home unless they get this variance. Now, I don't know if that was done back in the 60s when the first one was granted the zero lot line setback. Maybe it wasn't even looked at back then, as it wasn't now. But that's not what the law requires. So I'm quite confident if this were to go to the Superior Court on writ, we would be required to build a record of evidence to show, okay, well, what happened in the 60s on that lot? What are the special types of conditions on that property that justify that setback? And how does this lot then compare to that? Right? Are there similar conditions or circumstances that would justify it here as it was there? Or if it wasn't considered there, then why are we allowing it here? Because then anyone who applies from here on out can satisfy the burden, because we're all residential, we're all similarly situated, there's all these new regulations for building. So if that justifies it, then your zoning ordinance is useless. It's meaningless. Anyone can just apply and receive it because it's been done in the past. All right? I want to point out that in the report, it kind of goes through, and I believe this is, I'm sorry, it doesn't have page numbers, but there's a spreadsheet in the Planning Commission's report that lists certain past variance applications. The last one listed is P-06-45, which was a request for a zero lot line for a deck on the back of the property. And in that report, there was analysis supporting the denial of that request. And if I can quote, it's on page 4 of that report. It says, quote, "When looking for extraordinary circumstances that this property is subject to that the others are not, it couldn't be found. It is evidence from the plot plan that there is ample room to locate the house closer to Lakeview Road, which would then allow them to meet all the required setbacks. The lot is flat and no topographical features limit usable area." So in this case, the Planning Commission actually took the required step of looking at unique hardship, which is required by the statute, by California Government Code, and by all applicable case law. And so in the findings on that, it was denied based on failure to establish unique hardship. And so I want to urge you guys to really let that sink in, because that is the case before you today. There has been no showing, there is no evidence of unique hardship. And so this is just ripe for reversal. If it's not done here, it's ripe for reversal later. And so that's really the main point I want to make. There's other points I could go through about special privilege, which was analyzed. And I think the argument is because other people have it, it's not a special privilege. Again, there's no logic in that, because that means that then everybody is entitled to it because it happens for it. You have to look at the circumstances in the application of the property, and you have to show that it would be fair for everybody based on the circumstances that are unique to that property, and that just simply has to be established. So I will leave it there for now. Thank you for your time, and if there's something maybe on rebuttal, we can maybe chat again. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Can I speak one more quick second? 10 seconds.
Sure, go ahead.
I want you to imagine you're sitting on my deck right now, and you have this entire view. You can look out across this whole room. Then imagine right here, they put a 6 or 7 foot fence. You can't see this way anymore. That's exactly what he's doing to me. By putting in the handrail, putting on patio furniture, and building the deck above the property. The deck or the hangar will be 7 feet above above the property line, based on the handrail and the deck, based on the condition of the property when he purchased it. It's completely unfair that he does that. Thank you, that's all I have.
All right. Tim and Karen? We're going to swear you in before. Can we do them both at the same time?
You can.
All right, you guys want to do that?
Okay, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear or affirm
I swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give
that the testimony that I'm about to give
in this matter is the truth.
in this matter is the truth.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Karen Lorenzo. This is my husband, Tim Lorenzo, and we're the property owners of 101 Lakeview Drive in Trinity Center. We purchased the property in the fall of last year. Prior to that, we owned a home that was 2 blocks away for the past 22 years. So we have developed residential residence in Trinity Center. My husband, daughter, and both of my son-in-laws are all pilots, and we've been flying in the Trinity Center for the past 20+ years. We've also dreamed of owning a home on the airstrip, and this past year we were lucky enough to find this property to build our dream. Our dream includes an enclosed in-ground hangar to park our Bonanza A36 airplane. We want to show you a 3/32 scale model of the property in question because there seems to be a whole lot of confusion with the in-ground hangar design and the elevations. The elevations of the existing properties along the taxiway slowly increase the further north you go along the taxiway. You'll see from this model that the middle section is the property in question, with the south side being a neighbor with a similar approved variance request and the north side being the neighbor appealing the variance approval. At the time of the purchase, the lot was filled with trees, brush, and tall snags that not only blocked the view of our property that we purchased, but also severely blocked the possible view for the neighbors on both sides. Many of these trees and brush were also encroaching on the taxiway setbacks. We since have removed all the trees and the brush and opened up the view of the airstrip, the lake, and the mountains for ourselves and the neighbors on both sides of the property. You'll notice that the 3 houses have similar heights of hangars with patios on the top. The neighbor to the north that is appealing the variance approval has an elevated hangar top of approximately 2 feet above our requested hangar elevation. The neighbor on the south side currently has a hangar that is approximately 1 foot higher than our planned hangar elevation. On March 11th, as mentioned, the Trinity Center Planning Commission approved our variance and the application for building the in-ground hangar at the 0 lot line. I'd like to point out that in our opening statement made at the Planning Commission meeting, the hardship was identified and addressed. My husband discussed the need for a hangar for our airplane on a property that we purchased specifically to house an airplane. He discussed the new county code restrictions for buildable space on the property, and he mentioned the need to work around the approved existing septic system, which limits us to the size and the shape of our construction. There was also discussion from the planning commissioners themselves of the extra cost involved in building the house itself over the hangar if it were to be further back as a hardship. There are more detailed hardships that were not discussed during the planning commission meeting because the focus at the time was the neighbor's complaints and the opinion that the hangar would be blocking his view and his privacy. Those would include the fact that we did mention the property is more restricted in septic setbacks and buildable space than allowed in years past due to new code restriction changes. There is an existing approved septic system on the property. The layout of our construction design is the only option for the buildings in the buildable space. The hangar is needed for the safety of the airplane. We had issues in the past with bees plugging the instruments and weather damage at Trinity Lake with the airplane and outside elements. There's a potential for hitting cement rock if we were to dig further back into the property. Both neighbors on each side of the property hit the river of cement rock, including the appellant's original contractor when digging that far back on that property. At that time, there was a need for 350 pounds of dynamite to remove and break up the river rock to build his hangar under his house. There's actual holes in the rocks there that show where that was done, and we were told that by the actual previous owner. This would be a major hardship and a severe cost. We've already dug the hangar location successfully just to clear out some of the rocks without hitting any of the cement rock in the beginning part of it, but we're starting to find that we're seeing more of that farther back that we go. We've done that with proper permits. Also, as mentioned by the Commission, the engineering and building costs would be more than exceed our budget or return on our investment. Our plans and engineering are complete, and changing at this point would cost even more money. Prior to any digging on the property, we met with the Planning Department to discuss any necessary permits or approvals, and we obtained all necessary permits and submitted for approval not only from the Planning Department, but also from the FAA. As for asking for special privileges, there's been a little difference in opinion of how many houses are actually on that taxiway. We have counted them. There's 16 lots with 14 actual homes already built on the taxiway. And there's actually currently 4 hangars that are built in ground, one of which is an open covered hangar. 3 of these have approved variances, and ours would be the 4th. That should show that there really are no special privileges. We're just asking what other people have. The appellant's original argument against our variance was mainly focused on the fact that we would be encroaching on the privacy of his home and his view. With all due respect, I'd like to remind them that they purchased a home in a small community where the lot sizes are approximately 1/4 of an acre and are directly right next to each other. Their property also faces an airstrip on the back side where planes fly in and taxi out every single day. As for the view, I think you'll see by this model that we've actually by removing those trees and brushes, we've actually improved that for all neighbors, on both sides. He also claims that we have not shown any hardship for the need of the variance, and again, respectfully, we argue that. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions from the board? At this time, no.
Can I see that picture a little closer you're putting away there? Yeah, I can walk up there.
I do want to say, 13 feet was from the front. There's a big beam in the middle of the hangar that makes it real difficult to get the tail of the plane in. So if we need the slope for runoff of water, obviously, but we need that extra space inside. And it's really hard to limit us to exactly 13 feet. We could be a 1/4 inch off, and that could cause problems down the road.
You're welcome to take this forward if you'd like to, where it shows those trees are. Okay.
Can I ask the question from here, or do I need to go back there?
You're good.
Is this fencing here and here
Board meeting
be similar to the fencing you would use?
It'd be similar, and this elevation, like I say, is 2 feet higher than what we're proposing. This one's a foot higher.
And their view from here to there, is their best view?
On this house, this is the house, this is their house.
Can we make sure that the comments are being made into the microphone so that it can be kept for the record?
So I'll go back up and repeat what I just said. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So my question, looking at that picture he had there, looks like 91 Lakeview Drive and 121 Lakeview Drive both have some sort of fencing on top of their hangar, it looks like. And I was just wondering if they were pretty much the same. And neither of those are glass.
One is glass.
One is plexiglass, yes. The other one's cable.
Okay.
Mine is the one with cable.
Say it again.
Mine is the one with cable. And that is new, by the way. That was permitted and done about 6 months ago.
I don't think it's in that picture.
The 121 has the plexiglass?
Yes.
121, so if I'm looking at 91 Lake Drive, the home there, right, your home? Looking off, if you're looking out from your deck, looking off to your right, what are you seeing from there?
The runway.
What are you seeing without the trees there?
The runway.
The trees do not make any difference in your
The
line of
trees
sight?
were pushed. There was one tree that was right on the property line. It's a smaller, it's a very cone-shaped tree. There was a big hole in the trees. The picture is deceptive. Most of those trees were set back, and we could see right through, other than that one tree, which was debatably, it was on the property. It was debatably his tree or my tree. I wasn't sure. It was right on the marker. I want to make a comment about this.
Well, hold on a second. We'll get to your review though.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions?
No, I do not. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Underwood?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Jim Underwood, Underwood Law Offices, on behalf of the Lorenzos. Most of the issues that have been brought before the Planning Commission have been raised in the staff report and fairly and fully addressed. There was a similar and even more detailed discussion in the Planning Commission on the issues primarily presented. This is a pretty straightforward land use variance issue. And we agree fully with what staff presented. The Planning Commission got it right. There effectively is no net change from the conditions of the Lorenzo's parcel prior to development. The uniqueness, and I want to address some of the appellant's testimony and his attorney's comments as well, but what is unique is that there are these pre-existing limitations, these real constraints on development of the parcel. It would not, as proposed in the variance, result in any net decrease in view from the appellant's property. In fact, there'd be a net benefit. The removal of the trees would benefit the view of both neighbors. But let me speak to a couple of the primary issues that were raised today. The lack of need for variance. That's adequately addressed in the staff report, in my letter. The Lorenzos have summarized some of those key issues too. The elevated height, as I said, there's no net increase. There's been testimony about the increase that has been caused following the Lorenzo's purchase. There will not be an increase beyond 13 feet at the setback, the zero setback. The 5 inches at the existing setback line would still be approximately 2 feet lower than the appellant's deck. By virtue of the unique design requirements, the subsurface, rock, and otherwise, and the need for a modest slope supports that need. And I believe the Lorenzo's architect might be online if there are any questions about that, but that can be further addressed. Mr. Hamilton, I think, raised an important issue, and that is the unique hardship issue. For the reasons I just summarized and staff supported, this is a unique hardship. The sewer system, the rock, the constraints on building, as Ms. Lozier testified, the north end of the parcels facing the airport have increased elevation, increased slope. It's more of a challenge. And that isn't to say that it's critical to look at 2 of 19 or 4 of 19 lots to determine what's appropriate here. In fact, that's not the case. the variance is unique to this parcel, and it's been adequately supported. I guess the only other point I'd make is that it's kind of ironic. This is a backyard setback challenge, not a side yard setback challenge. Side yard setbacks are intended to protect, in the absence of unique hardship and other prerequisites, neighbors like the appellant. Backyard setbacks are intended to protect the backyard neighbor, in theory, the airport, the county. This would enhance the backyard neighbor and its promotion and use of high quality improvements to benefit and support the airport, while improving the tax base that is so important in this county and in all counties. So, I mean, the bottom line is the record supports all of the prerequisites to the issuance of a variance and the denial of this appeal. And for more broad policy reasons, it makes sense to deny this appeal and support the Lorenzos, who really want to be and will be active members of this community. You can tell by their families' participation in the aviation world that they're active, certainly there. I think that you'll see that they may be interested in helping with the county in an advisory capacity on airports and otherwise. They will be big contributors to this community, and I think their variance is well supported. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions from the board? All right, seeing none for now. Mr. Joseph, you can have your review on that.
I would not be contesting this, the height of the hangar or any part of the hangar if they were building within their property and not in the setback. They have the right to build whatever they want on their property, but the setback, they're asking for a special exception, and that's my bone of contention. 13 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet on their property line. My contention, because they have the right to do that, and they bought the property with that right to do that. My argument is they're asking for a special privilege. I'm asking to not have that special privilege because it's going to create a hardship for me. And their benefit should not create, the variance very clearly states that their benefit should not put a hardship on anybody else. Them building their hangar in the area that they're not supposed to build the hangar. All they have to do is push it in the hill. Push it in the hill like mine. My hangar is 44 feet wide and 40 feet deep. Their hangar is 3/4 of that. Push it in the hill more and get it off the setback. They just don't want to spend the money to dig the dirt because that's what they identified a few minutes ago. It'll be a financial hardship for them. They're going to spend $750,000 on this. To spend another $10,000 or $15,000 digging a hole, and I've been a general contractor for a long time. I build a lot of things. You're not talking about that much more expense in the scheme of things. They don't want to pay to have the plans drawn and redone. They shouldn't have started digging before they had everything in place. Push the hangar back, and it creates no hardship for anybody then. That's all I'm asking for. Just don't let them build it on the setback. And I won't come, they can build it 25 feet tall, I don't care, because that's their right to do that. But it's not their right to block my view in an area where they don't have the right to build without a special exception. That's all I have to say.
Are there any...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Hi, just a few quick comments if you would oblige.
Yeah, of course.
So I just I want to address, there's a lot of issues here, and there's a lot of talk about views and privileges, and I really want to bring us back to the point that there are very specific requirements in the law that are well supported by case law that must be found, and they must be in the record in evidence, okay? Mr. Underwood pointed out on the unique hardship issue that there are now talks of septic system, rock, building constraints codes. The problem is, and this is an important distinction, it's an important point, none of that is in the application itself. None of that is in the Planning Commission's report and decision. None of that is considered. None of it is discussed. None of it is in evidence. We're here with the parties providing testimony today. I don't recall that that was done here. And so I just would again reiterate that point that I see no evidence that it can't be done within the zoning constraints as they are. And that's really what must be shown. It has to be an extraordinary circumstance. And that's what the law requires. These are not my thoughts. This is what is necessary because zoning decisions are judicatory decisions that affect people's lives, and they have to be done in accordance with the law based on evidence. I hope that the board will be very mindful of that in their decision making, and thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Supervisors, do you have any questions for Mr. Joseph or Mr. Joseph's legal representation at this time? I have a couple. Mr. Joseph, you stated if they left their hangar at exactly 13 feet, you would be okay with that, but you're concerned that they want to build a deck and a rail, and that's the issue?
I would be willing, and this is the olive branch that I reached out to Mr. Lorenzo. I would be willing to make this concession. I think that, first of all, I want to clarify, I think that if we went to Superior Court on this, that I think we would win the decision. I don't want to feud with him. I came up to Trinity County to get away from all the Valley crap, and I'm trying to build relationships with people in this neighborhood. So I reached out to him and said, if no part of the hangar in that setback area exceeds 13 feet, not 13 foot 1 inch, I would be willing to accept that. I also identified that I wanted a see-through handrail other than glass or plastic, because, as I said, I build over 200 decks a year. Glass is a misconception, and it creates a glare, and it could create a glare towards me. So I would want stainless steel cable like I have, which is the most see-through, and that was brought up in the planning, that was brought up by the director of the Planning Commission, and she specifically asked that, and they based their conversation on the fact that he agreed, or he said he would do something like stainless steel cable, and then it didn't get put in the minutes, and then he retracted, be willing to do that.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand your position clear. If the builders built at the proposed plans with the 13 feet and put in the steel, sorry.
It is not my wish that that happens. I'm trying to not completely destroy it or have a feud with the neighbor. I'm trying to reach out and make it somewhat cordial, give him what he wants, and in turn I'm willing to make a concession. But I think I'm really giving in a lot on this by even offering that to him the other day.
Okay, and then the house that is on the other side of the lot that currently has plexiglass on their porch, does that cause glare already?
It's plexiglass. That's not illegal. That's not legally allowed. It's broken. It's from 1960. It's so fogged up you really can't see through it.
Okay.
And it's not a legal handrail. Somebody took some pickets and put screwed plexiglass to it.
Okay.
And that was built in 1968. It's not up to code. It wouldn't. And that's where they acquired the property. They acquired the property from those owners.
Okay.
Those owners own 2 lots.
Oh. Any additional questions for Mr. Joseph from the board? Seeing none at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Lorenzo's, I got a couple questions. I didn't notice any deck plans on your building plans. Did I overlook them, or was there just the one little stub up of the rail at the end?
The top of the hangar is the deck, and that's why we need the slope for the water to run off. And we went to the minimum height to get the plane in, and that the beam drops down so far in the middle of the hangar that if we don't have our slope 5 inches and we have to drop the front 5 inches, it's really tough to get the airplane in there.
So you are...
And all the other neighbors' decks slope up, so it's following, you know, his is 2 feet higher, the neighbor over here is a foot higher, they slope back, so we continually slope up together. And, you know, think about this, the railing's 42 inches high, and if he's 2 feet higher than us, our railing's only up 18 inches, you know. And we could, without a permit, put a 6-foot fence on the property line. You couldn't see anything then. We don't want that. We want the view. I'm a pilot. I want to watch the planes come in. That's why we cleared all the trees. You know, we want that view.
So then your deck, instead of on the plans, it says 13 feet, so you're actually requesting 13 feet 5 inches?
Yeah, because the approval was 13 feet at the property line, and we talked about the slope, you know, and it's usually the maximum, or it's not the maximum, the best is 1/4 inch per foot. So that at the 20-foot mark, it takes it up 5 inches.
It would be 13 feet though at the beginning.
Yeah.
And 13.5 coming in towards the house?
Mm-hmm.
It has to have runoff, otherwise the water just sits there. So it's just, I mean, that's not a major slope.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to, I mean, if I could drop it, I would. I mean, we always like to try to, you know, make friends, whatever, but it's a tight fit for our build. And the same with what we said about if we do have to dig back, we're already hitting hard rock. When they built their place, they had to use 350 pounds of dynamite to get back that far because they hit the river rock. I don't think anybody's going to want to see us slide off 350 pounds of dynamite. You know, we probably wouldn't even get that approval. So that's a major hardship. And we did start the digging because everybody said this variance should be no problem. We got a double-ended encroachment permit. Our site was inspected. We started our dig. We've removed the trees. We want to get going, you know.
And the amount that's been already dug, if we didn't put a hangar there, we're still going to park our airplane there. So, I mean, we had to dig that area out anyway. So it's not like we've gone farther back than what, you know, we would need to at this point.
And then all the material from that digging is up on top of the property right now?
No, we never raised the property.
I can show you pictures of the new dirt on the property that's 2 feet taller. These are recent
It doesn't
pictures.
matter. I think it's irrelevant. I'm just curious.
It's just from pulling the dirt out.
He's being dishonest again. We've never put any I mean.
Okay, this is not your opportunity. I should be quiet. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're all within the grading permit anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Are there additional questions from the board?
I will have some of staff when we get.
Okay.
Do you need to take this
We do have our architect who might like to speak. I don't know if, I can't tell if she's online. Sarah Atkins.
So
I'm here.
let's make sure we go in the proper order, making sure both sides have had their rebuttal.
This is your rebuttal moment.
Okay, so let's open it up for their rebuttal, and then we will close the testimony aspect.
Yeah, yes, Jim Underwood again. So I think one of the most important points of rebuttal is whether or not there was sufficient evidence in the record relating to hardship and the other findings to be required. The architect did testify at the Planning Commission, and I think can testify here today about the unique building designs and constraints that support this variance, including the hangar height that was just being discussed by Mr. Lorenzo. So if she's available, I think that would benefit the board in making this decision. And I don't have anything further.
Okay.
I'm available to speak. This is Sarah Atkins.
Okay, so if you want to speak in anything as far as the rebuttal goes, this is your moment.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on the height that keeps coming up at 7 feet. I don't know quite where that number is coming from, but in looking at this lot specifically, one important thing is that we are working with the existing slope, which drops off at the property line. So if we were to pull the hangar back 20 feet, we would basically just be cutting off 20 by 13 feet of the property, which realistically doesn't make a lot of sense to do. But basically the height, the hanger is at grade, it's not sticking up 4 feet above grade. The lid of the hanger is the deck. We're not building the deck specifically, it's just there, it's the lid of the hanger. And so by code, we have to have a guardrail on the end there, which is the 42 inches. So what is sticking up is the 42-inch guardrail, which is unavoidable, whether it's a deck or not with that drop off. Just a safety issue. So I guess I'm not picking up where that 7 feet is coming in, but primarily we are trying to work within the existing, take advantage of the existing slope and terrain. And as far as the material on the guardrail, I don't know that we haven't quite decided. I think I showed cable, but Tim and I didn't discuss the details of it. At the time, it hadn't been brought up, so it wasn't really necessary. I think if there's any questions, I don't know. Obviously, it's a small lot. From what I gather from the Planning Commission or the Planning Department original report is that it's not specifically that this lot, the hardship amongst itself, but all of the lots along the runway are because of their small size. The requirement to have septic, which usually has much greater setback, and then the 20-foot, the existing setback. So my understanding from the Planning Commission's original report was just that really all of these lots have a hardship. Is it possible? Yeah, if the neighbor did something, it doesn't mean that this lot, he's going to build the exact same house. In addition, we have that septic that's already installed. We really don't have the ability to move it because it would require greater setbacks and most likely more leach lines. But I guess I mean more of the same. If there's any questions of the commission that I can help answer specifically, I'd be more than happy to.
Any questions from seconds? All right, no, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, heading back there. There you are. I believe we have some other questions here for you.
Let's open it up to public comment first, then we'll bring it back to the board, and the board can then ask questions of staff and discuss it amongst themselves.
All right. Emma, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay. Well, then we will open it back up for questions. Supervisor Groves.
My first question is to council. In this appeal to us, the Planning Commission in the code here proposed hangar structure will not exceed 13 feet. Does this board, since it doesn't seem that they've appealed that, but are asking for that now, do we have the ability to change that at this time since it wasn't appealed to us, that decision?
And I'd have to ask for some clarification from the assistant planning director, but I believe it was just a global appeal of the Planning Commission decision. When we're dealing with appeals, the board does hear what we would call de novo, so you do hear it fresh, which means you can make decisions or hear additional testimony and have an opinion that alters or differs from the Planning Commission. And there's good evidence to support that, but I do believe this was a global appeal. Let me look at it.
But not by the housing applicants didn't appeal the decision.
Correct, they did not appeal that decision.
Right.
Correct. Oh, okay. I now understand your question. So yes, this was not appealed by the housing applicants, so they accepted that term and condition of the Planning Commission. That does not prevent you from, again, modifying the decision of the Planning Commission if you believe that testimony and evidence presented here today support a modification. Okay. But that is not something that is before you unless you feel it's necessary.
So we have the ability to change that and or add other conditions?
You do. So there's a case, Anderson versus Pinninger, which comes out of West Virginia, that does say when you hear this, you are hearing it anew. You can make any decision you feel appropriate based on the testimony you've heard today. even if that testimony is different from what was presented during Planning Commission.
Okay, Ms. Lozier, so when it says out of the commission, the proposed hangar structure will not exceed 13 feet, is in building, is there some sort of thing saying, yeah, but you're given 5% leeway, or do you guys take it that 13 feet is it max, not an inch more?
So what we would look at is what the conditions of approval are. And based on my understanding from the Planning Commission, when they made their motion for this particular project, that what we were looking at and what I added into the conditions for this was the proposed hangar structure will not exceed 13 feet in height from grade at the rear property line. So that was specifically the grade at the rear property line is how this condition was written. So depending on how you wanted to interpret that, you know, when I'm looking at the plans, when they submit plans to me, and I am reviewing that for consistency with the conditions, I am going to be looking at the rear property line height.
Let me get back to the minutes. I know that's what the well, it says that in the rear property line.
The amended resolution?
In the resolution, but I don't think it says that in the minutes.
That'll be what's important in the amended resolution.
Are you looking at the motion on page 4?
Yes. See, in the motion, it just says the hangar elevation does not exceed the 13 feet. So, but in the resolution, from the rear property line was added, and I'm not quite sure what the Planning Commission meant.
And my decision to put 13 feet at the grade at the rear property line was based on the overall discussion. So if you would choose to have that reworded to specifically the same language as the minutes, you know, that I personally don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to make sure that you understood where I was coming from when I added in that last condition 16 on the Exhibit A to the resolution.
Well, I think at this point I'll just leave it that this board should solve that problem before we make a decision, or as part of our decision. Also, they did talk about the railing in the minutes where the applicant agreed, or not the applicant, yeah, the applicant agreed to have a cable railing, but that wasn't put in. Why?
So during the meeting, when there was some discussion back and forth, and that was between Mr. Lorenzo and Commissioner Sharp. And Commissioner Sharp asked Mr. Lorenzo, would you be okay with the railing? And then they started a discussion. At that point in time, the public comment had been closed, and Chair Stewart suggested that that was probably an inappropriate conversation, and so that at that time was not why that was included in the motion, or my understanding why.
But there was no more discussion.
There was no more discussion.
So, back to council, or Lisa, you can also add in on this. So, under planning law, or I shouldn't play lawyer here, but When one applicant is allowed a special privilege, and then at a later date, an applicant with the same circumstances is allowed that special, applies, aren't we duty bound to allow that? Otherwise, we are not giving equal treatment.
That is correct, Supervisor Groves. One of the fundamental principles of planning law is that you want to apply the rules equally to equal situations. Now, there are situations where there's factors that differ, and you can take those into consideration, but with two identical situations, the rules should be applied the same to both.
Okay. So if we decide that other applications were allowed this zero access, and we believe that they're the same fundamental issues, then we would be adding equal permitting to that. I kind of got lost there, I apologize.
No, I believe I understood what you're saying, which is if you have a situation where this occurred prior, where the direction was given, do we have to follow that same direction prior? And again, unless there's differences in the situations, which again, that's a factor to consider. If there is a change in rules within the county, a change in situation, or factual, the facts are not identical, you can make an alternate decision, but when all else is equal, you need to have an equal result.
All right, thank you, counsel. And at this point, I have no further questions.
All right, are there additional questions of staff from the board? Looks like none.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Tibbet.
Yeah, I just had one quick thing I wanted to point out is that airport land use decisions are supposed to be referred to the Airport Land Use Committee. And so I just wanted to bring that up to make sure that there was an understanding of that. So if there's issues related to regulations and stuff, usually it's referred to the committee unless it's addressed in the current adopted land use plan. And I've been scurrying trying to find the answers to that, but I haven't. But I wanted to make sure that the board understood that somewhere along the line, probably the Airport Land Use Committee should see this.
County Council?
Changes imposed.
Okay. So then I would ask County Council, at what point would we do that, and would that stop this process now for us making judgment on this?
No, you're able to proceed forward on that. When you're dealing anything related to an airport, we have the Airport Advisory, Land Use Advisory Committee. We also have the FAA that are going to rule on these types of decisions. So that would be up to the property owner who's wanting to build to get those approvals going forward on those. This is merely giving them permission for a variance, which again is separate and appropriate to move forward today. I would advise the property owner to follow those steps because there may be problems going forward with this fence height from the FAA. That means they can't build regardless of
fence height or the rail height?
I'm sorry, the rail height.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would love to add some comments on that.
Yeah.
And while I was reviewing Mr. Lorenzo's application, I did go through the 2009 Airport Land Use Comprehensive Plan in regard to whether this particular application would be required to be seen, heard, and reviewed by the Airport Land Use Commission. And based on, there are specific findings or specific conditions, certain things that the Airport Land Use Commission will always hear, and that is general plan amendments, zoning amendments, specific types of projects that conditional use permits that may directly impact the airport. In this particular instance for a variance, my interpretation of those regulations is that if it meets the criteria for being consistent with the type of development, R1, this is a residential type development, if it is consistent with the height requirements, if it does not fall within any of the protected zone districts and create an issue of that nature, then it is not required to go before the Airport Land Use Commission. So that's my interpretation, and that is specifically why I did not request that this applicant move forward with that review prior to going to the Planning Commission, which would typically be the most appropriate route, because the Airport Land Use Commission is an advisory body either to the Planning Commission or to the board or both, depending on the type of project. So that was how we got to this point.
Thank you, Lisa. Any additional questions for Lisa at this time?
I just want to be clear, Lisa, and I would agree with your assessment, having sitting on the A clubs. But basically, what you're saying is there's an entitlement with the property that would be already have been looked at in the land use, the airport land use, and so that's why it didn't have to go in that commission.
I don't know. I don't know if what they're proposing to do would be an entitlement in regard to the Airport Land Use Commission. So that may just be an interpretation on my part based on my review of the 2009 Comprehensive Land Use Plan. You know, what I was looking at this was just specifically as a land use entitlement in regard to the variance section of our zoning ordinance, 1731, and review of this application was based on that.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions from the board for disclosure? Seeing none, we're going to hold off on now, Mr. Joseph. Is there any further discussion with the board? What would you like to have? What's up?
So we're totally closed on the...
Everyone's had their rebuttals. Yeah, I think the public hearing, I think, is concluded at this time, unless there's any last minute questions here. I think we concluded that portion of the process. I guess I keep kind of coming back to the, unfortunately your worst case scenario. What's the guardrail going to be made out of? Have you guys made your decision on the guardrail?
No, our plans show the cable railing. Do I need to get in the mic?
It would be preferred, yeah.
Our plans show cable railing. I like it. I just, they made it clear in the planning meeting that we have the approved code railing, and we probably will use cable, but by the time we finish our project and ready to do it, if there's something cool that came out, we may want to use that. So we didn't want to be restricted, because we didn't have, that wasn't a requirement put on us by the planning department. But I'm not opposed to it. I didn't want to have to go that route if I don't get restricted, if I don't have to.
Yeah. All right, thank you. If there's any other questions, comments, considerations, we entertain a motion.
I would move that we uphold the Planning Commission's March 11 decision and approve the variance request.
As is.
As is.
I will second.
All right. A motion and a second.
For discussion, so you are, again, we come back to the 13 foot. What 13 foot are we approving? The 13 foot in the motion, or are we approving the 13 foot in the amendment? Or the resolution, excuse me.
The amended resolution, which cites 13 feet from the back grade, correct? which would put the house side of the deck at 13 feet 5 inches. Is that correct? And the rail is cited to be 42 inches tall. Is that correct?
So some clarity on that, Jill.
Yes, 13 feet from the outer edge of, at the property line, but sloping to an additional 5 inches higher than that as it abuts the house.
All right. So motion and a second.
I would have another motion.
All right, sure.
That we accept as is, but we follow the motion of the planning commission and have the structure not at 13 feet, not to exceed 13 feet. I would also.
That's confusing to me. You mean no rail?
No, it's, the motion says that the structure shall not be over 13 feet.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about the house side of the hangar deck not being over 13
Yeah,
feet?
the hangar deck structure.
Okay.
So what you're saying is if that's at 13 feet and they have to get their slope for water.
Well,
the
we have
outer
it, hold it. I apologize, Supervisor Cox, we have.
I'll second that for
Okay, thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
Well, I also wanted to add on that, and I guess I should have discussed this, we can discuss it afterwards, that there be a see-through railing that maybe is approved by planning staff at the end of this process.
Does the second agree with that modification?
Sure.
Thank you.
My concern, are we ready to discuss that?
Yes, now we
My
can discuss.
concern is if that's 13 feet and you have to slope it for water and they can't get the plane in, what good was it?
Supervisor Cox, can I ask that you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, please.
My concern is if it's 13 feet as it meets the house and you have to slope downward 5 inches for water drainage, and when that process is finished, you can't get the plane in, what good was it?
Well, I'm going on the basis that as I reviewed the minutes of the planning commission, that's what their request was. And we were following the request of the planning commission, and it was Lisa that and I understand, I'm not trying to ding on Lisa here, that that added that to the resolution. And so, and I also, point out that the applicant didn't appeal to us that no, the 13, it wasn't high enough. Now, maybe that's because they're going off the resolution versus the motion. And then probably the wording should be done better on the see-through railing. I'm trying to, we have two good families moving to Trinity Center here. And so I'm trying to do all my best here to make them not be enemies forever. And so with their see-through railing, instead of them arguing about what that is to have our county be a third party in that and say, yes, that's see-through, we can work on both sides.
I guess the one thing that I still would ask is if you picture this whole thing finished and we're talking 5 inches, that's all the way up against the house. When you sit in their home and look that direction, 5 inches there that slopes down to 13, an extra 5 inches here, that slopes down to 13 feet when you're done. I'm just not seeing how that wrecks.
It's 10 inches at the house, it's 5 inches at the setback. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is the case.
Right. One of my concerns is with the 13-foot thing is I don't think that we can really say at the house. We could set it 13 feet at the setback, but if they can do whatever they want from that point on. Once they get the setback, they could build an above ground hangar. If they change their plot plan, they could have as long as they weren't violating airport land use heights. At that setback, we can't tell them you can only be 13 feet high. So I think that at that point, from the setback back to 0, which would be 20 feet, we could restrict it, but anything beyond their 20 feet coming back toward their house, we can't say that they have to be under 13.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan, and I would accept clarifying our motion to say 13 feet at 20-foot setback.
And
So that's essentially currently what it is.
that was what I understood. Lisa was saying was 13 feet at the property line.
No.
So,
yeah, but the property line is
which is the property line is the front of the building. The setback is 20 feet back from the property line.
But the hangar is how deep?
It's 32.
So after 20 feet of the hangar, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's his point. I mean, that's not what the motion they said, but I accept that as.
So then after 20 feet in, it would be 5 inches higher.
And they could.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that eliminates that issue.
But they'll still have to have some slope.
Right.
I don't know how much slope. I read a lot of.
So it was half an inch for every
quarter inch of foot usually, but they're in their all the planning commission stuff I read. The proposed decking is concrete. You can go a little flatter with concrete, so I think that they could work around it. And I think it would be logical to go 13 feet at the setback. And then they'll end up having to drop a few inches maybe out toward the front of their hangar, but they can adjust that with their architect and what slope they need to get.
Wait, you're adjusting the subsequent motion 1 is as is with the 13 feet hangar issue, but
and
so yeah, I asked to adjust that to that.
The 13 feet is at the setback line.
At the 20-foot setback.
Does the second agree with that change?
Yes.
Or subsequent has been adjusted?
So what does that do to your hangar?
Hold on a second.
Inside and it's not
Jeremy?
concrete.
Oh, sorry.
You can't reopen it unless you formally reopen it.
Okay, I apologize. I shouldn't.
You're fine.
No joke.
So if it's 20 feet in and then it's 13 feet up, and then you need to get that grade going back out, then you're looking at.
The alternative would be, and I hate to say these sort of things, but is that we could continue this while they came and talked to their architect and we're making architectural decisions here, but to see if that's a possibility, and then if they came back and argued a hardship case for something else, I mean, that's a possibility we could give them as well.
If that was the case, what I'd recommend is that hold on a second, that the board continue this request, we come back with some written findings on it, and then that would give them a period of time to adjust it. If that's the board's pleasure, you can also do it today, and we can do it based on just the motion. But that would be an option.
So we would ask for written findings from Lisa.
Well, it would come from my office.
Oh, it would come from your office.
Yes, we typically do, with the assistance of the planning department, we typically write the written findings. But again, we can do it, we have enough based on the motion to go forward today if that's your pleasure. But if you are going to continue it, at least give us some direction to come back with some written findings so that we have something to present you next time.
Can I please make one quick comment?
Or if I'm gonna allow comment, can I allow each party to have 5 more minutes?
I just need 10 seconds.
Your pleasure.
It's legally sound.
You are legally sound, it's your pleasure.
Okay, I'll give each one of you guys a minute, and go ahead.
His application requests 13 feet. His application to the planning department requests 13 feet, not 13'5". I made a condolence, I would prefer 10 feet. And so I don't have to look as much at the handrail. I gave him what he asked, I'm conceding to what he asked for. I'm the one making all the compromises on this. He hasn't had to make any compromises at all. He asked for 13 feet, the planning commission gave him 13 feet, now he's saying I want 13'5". It's not what he asked for. He asked for 13 feet. I also know that he could slope it. I build 200 decks a year. He could slope it, instead of going downward, he could slope it both ways. It's only a 1/4 inch per foot. We do that all the time. I build the type of decks he's talking about building. He also could put a smaller header beam and use steel instead of wood, and he could probably get that hangar down to 12 feet. Because instead of having a big, huge beam, he could use steel and have a much smaller beam. So there's ways he can do this. I work with engineers and architects on a daily basis, and there's plenty of ways he can skin this cat. He asked for 13. Please hold him to that 13 feet. And please clarify in the handrails, I don't want glass or plastic. It creates a glare. I would love see-through. I'm open to see-through, but I want it to be see-through of metal, not obstructing my view, Kate. I put stainless on mine 6 months ago. You can't even see it. You see right through it. And that's what I would request, because I don't have to look through one side. I have to look through the side and the front to see through.
All right, thank you, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you.
Board members, Jim Underwood. I think the record is clear that the commission limited the height at the property line to 13 feet, which would make it 13.5 at the 20-foot setback line. But delay is going to kill the project. If that's what the board wants to do, that would be the effect. We're late in the season now. The Lorenzos are willing to accept 13 feet at the 20-foot setback line. They'll figure it out. Delay is something that would present a big problem. So if it's approved today, that's what they would accept. They can make it work. Notwithstanding, the designer said there are real constraints. They'll make 13 feet at the 20-foot setback line work, which means slope out to the property line. They'll lose 5 inches of clearance for their plane, but they'll make it work. And as to the rail, they'll meet code. Their intention is as was explained, but they'll definitely meet code. Thank you.
Can you not lower the floor a little bit?
Well, they said they would do it, so
Okay.
how they do it's their deal.
Good enough.
All right, well, we have a motion and a subsequent motion on the table here. And I would like to know if there's any further discussion on either one of the 2 motions.
I just want to make sure, are we clear, or is the planning staff clear on what we're asking for in the railing? Since they would be, is it clear that that's who would make the decision?
You made it clear in your motion, that you would request that the planning commission approve of it. They're going to approve it based on what the code says. So if you have anything additional, such as not using a specific product, that would be important to put in your motion. Otherwise, they're going to approve it pursuant to code.
Okay, then did you have something to add? Okay.
Nope, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Right, so with that, I would add that glass, and actually I think I would guess through the airport land use that it wouldn't be allowed anyway, but that glass or plexiglass not be used.
There is no glare allowed at the airport in the rules.
Right.
One moment, he has an amendment to a subsequent.
I will agree to that.
Okay, so to clarify, the subsequent 1 motion is the as-is with the 13-foot setback occurring. Supervisor Groves?
At the 20-foot setback.
At the 20-foot setback line. All right. And you've also added that there will be no.
Glass or plexiglass railing.
Okay. Is that clear for all the supervisors on our subsequent one? And the first motion was as is presented. So if that's it on the discussion, I'll ask Emma to pull the board on our subsequent one motion.
Okay, this motion was made by Supervisor Groves and seconded by Supervisor Frazier. The motion was to uphold the Planning Commission decision with the height not to exceed 13 foot at the 20-foot setback line, with the see-through railing approved by the Planning Commission, excluding materials including glass and plexiglass. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
I hope
hearing
you guys
us.
are good neighbors. Good, I need it. I want to get forward. All right, you guys want to break? Are you ready for solid waste? Then you want to do solid waste and then take a break? Anybody? I was going to decide that. We're going to keep going.
Can we do this one and maybe take a quick break again?
That sounds good. All right, we're going to solid waste. Item 3.3. Conduct a public hearing to consider taking action on protests regarding the number of units charged to residences or businesses for the solid waste annual parcel fees. No impact to the general fund, potential reduction of revenues in the amount of $100 per equivalent unit to the solid waste enterprise fund. Diane, you have the floor.
Good morning. Diane Rader, Deputy Director of Solid Waste. This is the second and third of public hearings for the annual parcel fee billing. It's the opportunity for the board to hear any protests for the number of units that we build out and make any changes that they think are appropriate for that. The fees were adopted in April and billed out in April, and each unit billed represents $100 revenue to the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. That's it for my comments.
Thank you. Are there any technical questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll open this up to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item, Emma?
I have no raised hands and no new checks.
All right. Then we'll open this up to the board for discussion.
If there's no protests, I think we.
Is that a motion, Supervisor Brooks?
We're done.
Should I second that then?
Well, you need a little more formal than that.
Oh, if you get formal.
Well, I don't think we need to this is only, unless I'm misreading this, which I've done before, but.
If there are no questions and there's no public comment, then this public hearing is over.
Right.
That concludes our public hearing. Thank you for your time, Dan.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And with that, we will adjourn until noon. Is that correct? Is that what you want to do?
You know,
Or
it's
you want to?
the board's pleasure how to proceed. If we could finish our open session items now, then take a break, then read our items into closed session, then take a break until probably about 1:15 until the outside participants are available. Would that work for the board?
Okay, for closed session.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, we're going to go into county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board or staff may request that an item be heard out of order. Are there any staff members or board members wishing to pull an item? Seeing none, we will go to clerk of the board. Item 5.1. Pursuant to county fee waiver policy, find that the California Conservation Corps volunteers trash pickup provides a benefit to the public and is not for the purpose of fundraising, and approve the CCC's application of waiver for county fees, waiving solid waste fees in the amount of up to $52.80, potential loss of revenue to the solid waste enterprise fund in the amount of $52.80. Diane left the building, so I imagine this will go to Mr. Goons.
Well, Diane couldn't forward to
She started today, so she was, come on back, Diane.
Yes. Are there any technical questions for Diane? About this fee waiver. Seeing no technical questions, we'll open up for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item memo?
I have no raised hands
All right.
and no new chats.
All right. Are there any objections to this request?
I would move to accept 5.1 as presented.
All right. And we have a motion from Supervisor Groves, a second from Supervisor Cox. Please pull the board.
Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Motion passes. Transportation 5.2. Take the following actions regarding the agreement with Tolis Inc. of Redding, California for the Lance Gulch Road Phase 2 project. 1. Ratify the road commissioner's signature on a contract change order CCO 36 and 36-S1, increasing the maximum cost of the contract by $166,288.58 to purchase intersection signal and lightning equipment, reflectorized backplates, Caltrans approved anchor bolts, and hire crane and operator required for offloading of signal poles. And 2, approved CCO 36-S2, increasing the maximum cost by $891,766.20 for intersection signal and lightning system construction and road surface improvements at Lance Gulch Road and Highway 299. No impact to the general fund. Additional $239,782 from various federal allocations for roads and $150,000 from local roads maintenance and rehabilitation funds. Mr. Tippett.
He is in transit, he wants to be here in person, so.
Okay, then we are going to hold on that item, and
He's stuck at the stoplight.
Yes.
we're going to go to Trinity County Transportation Commission, item 5.3. Discuss and/or provide direction to the Trinity County Transportation Commission's Executive Secretary regarding the allocation of the CRRSAA funds for various types of transportation projects and authorize the Executive Secretary to execute any necessary agreements. No impact to the general fund revenue in the amount of $698,797 for the Trinity County Transportation Commission. And we have, Mr. Tippett. So, we're just on hold. We need some nice elevator music. We'll take a 5-minute break while we wait for our staff members. Margaret, you said 115 or 130?
I said 115, but we can do 130 if that's your pleasure.
Oh, okay, so very nice.
That's when the council's available, so.
All right.
More importantly, when are we done with lunch?
That's a good point.
15, we got enough time.
What are we doing here?
We are waiting for Dr. Coons. Well, do we have to?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, moving on.
Hold on.
Oh.
No, we're
Hold on.
waiting.
Public, welcome back. Transportation, item 5.2. Do I have to read it again?
No.
Yes. All right, Mr. Tippett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just confirm we're on 5.2.
Okay. At our February 5th, 2019 meeting, the board had approved change order 36 for the initial traffic signal for a change order at $777,850. Keep in mind this includes more than just the traffic signal, includes removing the old flashing beacon system and then changing over the pavement striping and adding some sidewalk we had talked about doing at earlier meetings. At the time, we didn't have the complete change order signed off, and so the contractor wasn't willing to sign that change order at that time, but did recommend that we order the signal poles. And at the meeting there, Supervisor Groves had requested that we come up with or order the decorative type traffic signals, which are the dark green type signals with a little bit of frill on the bottom. And so we did order those, and we ordered the new backplates we ordered those poles. They came in, and then after they came in, we reordered the backplates and returned the old backplates and reordered the foundation bolts. And so the signal equipment, we have all on site, sitting in the yard, ready to go. Everything from signal poles, pedestrian heads, signals themselves. And the backplates, we have the ones that are current standard, which have the orange or yellow surrounding type. So that did, when that order was completed, it was $166,288. So we had the equipment, and it took about almost a year to get on board, but we've had it sitting in the yard for a year now. And at that time, we had finished up the change order with Caltrans, and one of the things that I was surprised earlier was they had not asked us to repave the intersection. And before we got the change order finalized, they said, oh yeah, we forgot, we need the intersection repaved. The reason they do that is there's a lot of electronics that are put in underground that are sensitive to weather, and particularly all the induction loops that they put in. So they like to put a layer of asphalt over the top of them so that it protects them over the years. You put one in, if you just cut it in and put it in, it lasts about 10 to 15 years. If you put a layer of asphalt over it, it'll last the life of the asphalt, which is about usually in those type of intersections about 25 to 30 years. So you get quite a bit more life out of it. And then plus, when you put the asphalt over it, it helps cover up the old lines that were there. When you're moving lines around, you have to sandblast it off, and then no matter how much you try, it still leaves that mark of the old line. It's not the white that you see, but you see the sandblasting in the pavement, so it kind of is a little bit discolored. So anyways, to enter in, and then they asked for a right turn overlap signal for 299 on the Lance Gulch. They asked for some other changes, and then they asked for the pavement to cover the signal equipment that's in the road and to revise the appearance of the drive surface. And then there was some corrections in the way that they bid it. The other change order didn't have the mobilization corrected. It wasn't included, and now it is included. So when we completed that change order, the change order was for $891,766. There was one thing in the change order that we decided to include that we could exclude. Caltrans only requires you to pave their approaches. They do not require you to pave the county approaches. But we went ahead and included that in there. The 48, or we broke it out, but to include the $48,270 to include it. And when you come down on Lance Gulch and you're approaching the intersection, you'll probably notice right now that the left turn lane was hatched out for the CHP to be able to pull out of the office, and if there was cars stopped at the stop bar, they would have that free access up to the intersection to be able to pull out. While now they're going to have a push button that turns the light green for that approach, or for Lance Gulch when they come out of the CHP Center, an emergency, so that there won't be cars in front of them. So what we want to do is we believe that we should, because it's the old hatch that we're taking out and moving some of the lines around, we should go ahead and repave those approaches also, so we end up with a nice clean appearance when the project's done. And again, that's $48,270. So it gives us a total project cost of $940, $36. So at the time, our total Phase 2 construction allocation was $6.5 million. We have about $6.3 million left over. We've been doing some things in the interim on Lance Gulch to just tighten up some of the landscaping and other water issues. So we're a little short compared to where we initially expected to be. So here's how we propose to fund it. We had earlier $550,000 for secure rural schools, or 553 was approved earlier, along with what we believed at the time was 354 in STIP, but there's only 261,000 remaining. So it leaves a budget. We have a need to fill 815,511 budget to complete the project, or that was what's left over. So what we had done was we had identified still using the secure rural schools funds that we had, but we also have a project account called the Highway Improvement Program, and that was something established by the Trump administration, and we've been collecting money from that for the last 3 years, and we've been setting aside actually Lance Gulch, expecting that we had a possibility we'd probably have to use it there. And that was because it was distributed by population. It wasn't a significant amount of money. It was $127,133 that we had available. And then we also had, the block grant, the HIP program was $112,669. And the block grant program, also we get a small $35,000 allocation a year, and we've been saving that for 3 years. So we had an allocation of $127,133, or $113. So, and you probably recall about 2 meetings back, I brought the inspection contract with Caltrans, and we had about $35,000 savings. So that left us about $130,000 short. And what we did was we looked at some of the different programs, and we decided that the best program to tap into would be the SB1 RMRA program, which is eligible work. And so we would add that to the project funding for this upcoming fiscal year. And that actually would allow us to reduce the secure rural schools contribution a little bit, but it would have project funded correctly. I did include a sheet on the back that shows the funding distribution that's going into this. Now, I did consider asking Caltrans for some participation, but it was, we've been asking Caltrans for a lot. When you weren't here, or most of you, a couple of years back, we were going to put turnout lanes on Highway 3, and we were supposed to make an $850,000 contribution to that. And because at that time they had to take our STIP money back at the state level because of shortfalls in budgeting, this is about 2017-18, we weren't able to produce that $850,000. And we were fortunate at that time. Caltrans said, hey, look, we'll pick it up, but we'd like you to keep participating on programs in the future. And that was good. And then along came Tom Bell Road, where we had to put in a left turn lane going into the jail. And I was able to convince Caltrans to contribute half the money to that and actually have them build it. So that saved us a considerable amount of effort and time to get that done. So I was a little reluctant to go back and ask Caltrans to participate in this because we've had that good relationship, and we kind of have them on the roll right now with commitments to do things like Burnt Ranch left turn lane with the county contribution, and eventually some of the other left turn lanes. So I was a little hesitant to go and ask them at that time, but we felt that with the way it's currently budgeted, we can move forward. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Morning, Rick.
Morning.
Or afternoon by now, perhaps. I do have a question that is really quite multifaceted over time. And so follow me carefully, if you would, please, because today, my vote on this, I feel like I'm caught between a rock and a really hard place. So, the history that I have read on this project goes all the way back to 1989 and involves 2 traffic studies, one then and one in 1992. In 1997, I found a circulation study with guidelines and citizens advisory committees that extended all the way through October of 98. Then I found the 2002 general plan circulation element. And all of this, water calms me down, culminated in an EIR in March of 2003. And of course, there's going to be litigation. So that started in April of 2003 and ended in July of 2004. And what happened on July 30th of 2004 was that the Trinity County Superior Court ruled in favor of Trinity County on all issues that were litigated and found that that EIR was approved. It included the project with the traffic signal. I found an interesting point there because Supervisor Gross, I think your dad was involved in that, if I'm not mistaken.
He was.
It looks like he was a 26-year planning commissioner who said that this was the best EIR he'd ever seen. What I'm thinking is that the one thing yet to have taken place after July 30th of 2004 would have been to finish the job. But what I found was then a 13-year circling back in an attempt to incorporate a roundabout, even though the benefit to cost ratio was never going to work. So now we're 17 years along the path, and I called Caltrans and asked about funding over time, and what I found was they have something called an escalation rate, which changes from year to year, but currently that escalation rate is at 3.2%. So just for easy math, if this were only a 10-year delay, then we've spent 30 to 40% more on this project than we would have needed to had we finished it when we started. So I've got tax-paying constituents and nervous first responders who've been worried about liability. And in February, you gave me a time frame that was so specific that it only even had a 2-week margin of error in it.
Ian, your question.
I'm getting to the question. I'm so close to the question. That liability is of such grave concern. I found on July 31st of 2017 an email from the Deputy District Director of Maintenance Operations begging the board to please, with the delay of signalized intersection control, they're saying that the district and Trinity County have taken and continue to take risks that should have been resolved by this time. So the fact that you're reluctant to ask them to participate in this funding is probably awesome, because I think that that would be embarrassing. So my question ends here. If I were to give my vote today for the balance of these now grossly escalated dollars, what assurance are you going to give us that this truly will end the risk and finish the project?
Well, anytime you have an underground project or you have construction going on, there's always a risk of discovering something that you're not expecting out there. I mean, that's just a reality that we have. It's what we call a contingency fund, and we usually average a contingency about 10%. I have a change order. We have known conditions out there. We have been working the soil already. I'm not really expecting to see any of that, but I can't sit up here and say there's not going to be any changes between now and the end of the project. There's always unforeseen things that can happen. For instance, we could have I don't know. There's just a number of events that can happen, but there are some constraints that we have in this. One is that we have some funding that needs to be expended by the end of this year, so we're trying to make sure that we have that expenditure done. And quite frankly, this project is ready to go. I have a change order that's been submitted by the contractor. I believe it incorporates everything, so we are all, and not only that, the inspection's in place and all the cards are in place to get work going. They would like to start in January or July, but right now I was holding them off. I said you can go in and do the non-road stuff, but we're trying to get them to hold off until August 15th and then go full bore on it and get it done. So, as I'm saying, I can't tell you, oh, this is absolute, never going to change. I don't expect anything more than a 3 or 4% change if we have one, but this is pretty much it. This is the end of the road. This is what we have left to get the job done.
So as far as change, I wasn't really asking about extra money of like unforeseen contingencies that nobody can control. I'm asking about time, because asking them to hold off isn't what I heard from Tolis. I heard they've got 3 projects ahead of us, and once they get those done, then they can entertain us. They too would like for this to be done and behind them. But this holding off is what's puzzling me. I don't want to see it held off anymore.
Okay.
The liability is not something that we should be taking on as risk.
Okay. If I had been under the impression that we wanted to try to avoid having big construction going on right during the middle of the summer months. And a lot of times I can move things around a little bit to make that happen. I can give the instructor instructions to the contractor, change order sign, get out there and do it as soon as you can, and then allow them to work with Caltrans to get everything scheduled and begin, which probably will be in the middle of July or towards the end of June, middle of July, and move forward. It just, I was trying to make it a little more accommodating, that was all.
Yeah, and if I recall at the last time you reported out on this, the board did request that it was held back post 4th of July, if I'm not wrong in my recollection. Are there additional questions for staff?
I have a question that's not exactly about this.
Well, I'll speak to about this.
All right.
Yeah. Any additional questions for staff on this item?
I had I got some emails here recently, people reading this and wondering, because it says $150,000 from local road maintenance, which is a big issue in my district, as you're well aware. And one of the questions I had is, why are we spending our local road maintenance dollars on a stoplight that nobody wants? And so I would like you to explain that for the record, why we are doing the stoplight. I've heard the story before. I know the answer, but so the public can hear it again, that we don't really have a lot of choice in the matter when it comes to stoplight.
Okay. In the 2009 in the environmental study that was initially established, and then the follow-up EIR and the design, the RTP from 2009, had all identified that there was a need for a traffic signal at this intersection. The Glen approach was just starting to get into the delay warrants and some of the other volume warrants. Was just barely at the cusp. But they knew that once you put in Lance Gulch, what was going to happen was all the traffic that we were using on Washington, or it was used in Washington, was going to probably transfer over to Lance Gulch, and that was going to create something where you needed to have some sort of positive traffic control for the minor approaches, which is Lance Gulch and Glen Road. So that was part of the design of the intersection. When the RTP did come up in 2009, there was quite a voice for looking or considering roundabout if possible. So we did, when we got to the design or to the construction part, we did decide to install the stop signs and look at alternatives to possibly doing that. We did what's called a intersection control evaluation, which known as an ICE, and showed significant better operation with the roundabout. And I was able to go out and actually, at the time, I was able to secure full funding for the roundabout itself through federal grants, safety grants, and through some Caltrans contribution. The board did hear the item, and there was some challenges that needed to be overcome. And so the board at that time felt that the challenges were not in the best interest of the community, and so they did not make a decision to move that way. They said, let's stay the course with what we had selected earlier, which was the traffic signal. And since that time, we'd had, there was a request that we allow the always stop to operate a little longer. Caltrans did not want to do that. They had asked that we go back to the original plans and install the signal. So essentially, in order to carry out our commitment to Caltrans to allow for the arterial roadway to connect to Highway 3 and 299, we had committed back many years ago to install that traffic signal. And this is the end of, this is the fulfillment of that commitment that we made earlier.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
You're chomping at the bit to go there, go.
I just don't want the public to think that that's the whole story. Because I'm looking at a benefit to cost ratio of the signal, which was 6.24, and a benefit to cost ratio of the two roundabout studies, cycle 7 and cycle 8, there were 1.71 and 2.73 respectively, and Caltrans had said that there couldn't be anything with a benefit to cost ratio lower than 5. So for the public to think that this delay and the escalated costs that have come from that were reasonable is not an appropriate result.
Is that a question?
Did you want to explain that further?
I would like to explain part of this. From a cost-benefit ratio to the county, we would have been better off having a roundabout. Because as Rick said, he went out and did his magic Rick stuff and came up with a bunch of money. But you have to look at the political aspect of this, and the reason it was delayed is from more of a political standpoint and not from Rick itself, is because the community didn't want either one. And we messed around for a lot of years, and we tried to get Caltrans to change their mind, and they dug in. And so the biggest delay was the political aspect, and not if we would have told Rick 6 years ago to put it in, it would have been in a long time ago. But people did not want it. So if you want to answer the rest of your question, Rick, that's fine.
Are there any additional technical questions for Rick? All right. Hearing none. Is there any other additional discussion from the board? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion. I'll approve, motion to approve 5.2 as presented.
Did you say you would make a motion?
I made a motion, yeah. Okay. Any second?
I'll second. I can't believe I'm seconding it, but yes, I'll second.
All right. Or is there any additional discussion?
I wonder if there should be a time, in other words, it has to go forward now. I'm adding to the motion. I would just throw that.
If you want to make a subsequent motion, you can.
I would approve this as presented with the addition that these contracts, as soon as Tullis can entertain us, and Caltrans has already said when they've got the green light from Tullis, they'll show up, so I don't really see that as a calendaring problem, that it gets finished this time.
Any second on that? Hearing none, motion fails.
Oh, I would second that. I would just like some of the time period, Jill.
Well, you mean, it's true that if Tullis can't entertain us because they've got to get these other projects done, we can't like put a calendar date and say, okay, Rick, you can get it done by then, if it really is on them. They have 3 projects ahead of us. I'm just saying, let's make sure that we are that 4th project, and this isn't yet another year revisiting down the road.
Okay. In discussion, I would caution you greatly that if they're out there on the 10th of July and you are the supervisor from District 2, you'll probably be really sorry that you asked for it to be done during the busy time of the year.
Okay, so I should correct that because I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for there not to be another year's delay and we're back in this seat again.
My understanding is that we have to have this done by the end of the year or loss of money, is that correct? So I think maybe if you changed your motion to be completed by
Okay, that's fair. Thank
by
you.
the end of the year would be a better way to go. And I just don't, from my perspective, I don't want to give Rick the idea that, I mean, he's making thought process and scheduling so we don't slow traffic up on July 1st, August 15th. And that's been an ask for years. So I hope we're not changing that.
I don't want to change that viewpoint. It's risk management I'm worried about. And you're right, it's increasing the risk to be doing that project when traffic is at its highest. So thank you for that. I received that, and I would alter my motion to say that I would like it completed by the end of the year when the funding expires.
So, is someone going to second that?
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a subsequent motion stating that this project should be completed by the end of the year, and we have a regular motion. We will go ahead and hold the board on the subsequent motion.
I do have a clarification of that.
All right.
The subsequent one is approving signing these contracts and the monies, and then also having it by the end of the year.
So that's what I have recorded as the motion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a, for discussion purposes, I think that that's a dangerous move, putting a date in there. If we were to get another forest fire this summer, things of that nature, unforeseen things that come into play, and then having that pinch, and then feeling the burden of that, all of a sudden, I feel that there'll be regret down the line on doing that. And personally, I would just back staff with their momentum.
What happens then if that's the case and where is the funding?
That is a bridge we can cross when we get to it, unfortunately. But I mean, if there's a fire, I don't think we're gonna, prioritize a stoplight when there's lives at risk.
I certainly wouldn't put a stoplight over lives.
I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to in my mind. I know that's an extreme version of it, but, it keeps a nice bold contrast between the two things.
Okay.
But we have a subsequent motion and a second.
Can I withdraw my motion if you want to just return to the original?
Yeah.
Wisdom from both sides are coming my direction. I will just receive that.
It's your choice.
It is.
You can do what you want, but I mean, you have something you feel strongly about.
Yeah.
And you heard from one member, maybe you get beat, maybe you don't. But if you want to withdraw, but
I certainly don't want lives over a stoplight. I just want the money to end. That's what I want.
That's a good association.
So for just a little bit of clarity, when we had the car fire, Lyle told us, got the whole project emergency ordered to do from Whiskey Town, all the asphalt, everything. It was, we could be pulled off. I think it's a very minimal chance. But if there was a fire, Lyle and the reputation that he has, we'll get the other checks.
Supervisors, can I remind you to use your microphones, please? Thank you.
I think there is some risk in putting a time on this. I think it's minimal, but I do think that if it did happen, it would be significant. So maybe we should take the time frame off of it.
I agree with that. I think
It's
that
up
it's
to you,
not on
right?
record enough that I feel strongly about money, and I'm certainly not prioritizing lives over money. I would never do that. So with that being said and understood, I would withdraw my motion and return to the initial.
Okay. I don't think, do we need a second on that? Do you know? I think we're good.
No, she withdrew the
Okay.
motion, so you're.
All right, so we have an open motion on the table. I believe I made the motion and Supervisor Groves seconded it. Am I wrong? Emma, please pull the board.
This motion is to approve item 5.2 as presented. Motion by Supervisor Brown, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Sure.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Next.
And I'll be sure to report to the board monthly during director's report and let you guys know what the status is as we move along.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Stick around though, because we got Trinity County Transportation Commission, item 5.3. Discuss and/or provide direction to the Trinity County Transportation Commission's Executive Secretary regarding allocation of the CRRSAA funds for various types of transportation projects and authorize the Executive Secretary to execute any necessary agreements. No impact to the general fund revenue in the amount of $698,797 for the Trinity County Transportation Commission.
Okay. Well, this is actually good news. At the end of the year, last year, there was a Corona relief bill signed. A lot of us know this. I believe it was the second Corona relief bill. But there was one of the pieces of that was nice to find out later was there was $10 billion allocated to be distributed to all the states for roadway projects that are going on within the states through the federal aid process. So what it meant was by the time it kind of ran down through the distribution, it meant $1 billion was coming to the state of Caltrans for distribution. Right off the top, the way things have been set up, it was set up that there would be a 40-60 split with 40% going to, or 60% going to Caltrans, 40% coming to local government. And then there was also another split where they send 60% to Southern California, 40% to Northern California. Being that this was going through the RTPAs, which are you probably hear me complain, I know Supervisor Groves has many years, is when it gets to the MPOs, the first thing out of their mouth is, we're going to distribute it by population. And so there was an initial very hard push for it to go through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, which is strictly by population, which would meant our allocation would have been about $50,000 for $1 billion coming in the state. In better words, I've become known to really complain a lot about this. And so I was, the CTC said that, hey, we need to go out and have 3 workshops on this. And I was very vocal during those 3 workshops and actually made a very compelling statement talking about how when you have roadway systems, you have to have maintained miles within your county. And every county is going to have a set amount of maintained miles. But it doesn't matter whether one person drives up that road or 10,000 people drive up that road that year. It's still going to require a certain amount of maintenance dollars to keep that road there where it is in shape so it's passable. So we talked about that in depth, and I convinced everybody else that there was a responsibility for the smallest counties that they do consider a road mile component. So what they did was they kind of, in a sense, they came up with this alternative 3, which was to distribute half of the money through the block grant program and the other half through the STIP formula, which does take road miles into consideration. So when they were going back to the block grant program, I said, okay, but even when we have $400,000, we only end up with, I like to joke, we end up with either the negative 0.5 times either -4 money distributed out of that, which is we get a nickel of every penny that comes out of that, or 5% of every penny that comes out of the transportation dollars. So I was complaining about that, and they said, okay, we're going to do a minimum allocation for all the counties. We're going to go with $200,000, and so that's how we ended up with $697,000. And I was very happy that I was able to participate and get them to go with that. That pretty much matched the money that we lost. So through the COVID pandemic, we ended up walking away with a little extra. So a decision by the CTC was made to allocate those two funds, the $200,000 to the county and the $498,000 to STIP. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to look how we can match that money up to good projects. I did this, I will tell you straight up front that you can put this on to Lance Gulch Road. It would be allowed. But one of the things that also came in was we have a federal lands access project down in South County that's $650 million. So actually it's escalated to about 701, I believe. But it came in overbid about $250,000. And what the practice is on that is to go to the county that applied for that project, and they produce that overage. On this flap job of $7 million, we have not had to produce any money yet so far, except for $50,000 at the beginning to do an analysis whether we were meeting the conditions of what that was, or what we had applied for. I would remind the board that I actually have a flap application that we're preparing to go in next week. That's for close to $30 million to do Canyon Creek Road. You might recall we discussed that a couple of weeks back. So being that the flap job had that shortfall, I thought that would probably be a good place to roll that money into, because essentially the flap is a federal aid project, so it's already meeting all the federal requirements for projects. It has a NEPA, it's meeting the Buy America and all the other requirements. So it was a good project, and plus it's an arterial or a major collector and a minor collector, so it has a lot of improvements going on that road. So my recommendation was to roll that money, that $200,000 into that, and give it to FHWA and allow them to move the project forward without taking anything out. There's a lot of good things about the flap project. There's some failed slopes and a lot of poor pavement out there, particularly going over, I know Supervisor Frazier will attest to this, particularly once you go over Rue Senior Road, you go over the hill and you're heading down to Hentonshaw. That is in horrible condition, and it'd be really nice to see that pavement be all torn up and reconstructed as proposed in this project. So that was the first one that I wanted to recommend that we moved and funded for. And then the second project was we received some STIP dollars, $497, that have to be allocated to a project. Now, a lot of communities are planning on, some are planning on doing a new project, others are using it to match existing projects. What I have here is I have projects. I don't have a whole lot of projects to select from in the STIP that I can use it for. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take it and apply it to a project that's going to be constructed within the timelines or the deadline of these STIP dollars, and take the STIP dollars that are in that project that have no time limit and move them out back into our unprogrammed balance so that we can program them into other projects later on and not have that deadline. So essentially all I'm trying to do is, we call a lot of times wash the money so that if it becomes restricted with certain deadlines or certain timeframes, we use it within those timeframes, and the money we were going to spend there, otherwise it's unrestricted, we take that back and put it in our bank and use it somewhere else down the road. And for us, we're starting to build up a little bit of a balance or an account to look at addressing the first phase of Wildwood Road reconstruction. And that was the EIR that was approved about 3-4 years back. We got it's a considerable amount of money, and we're hoping to move that project forward. So with that, I can answer any questions.
You answered a lot of them. Are there any technical questions from the board? All right. Emma, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no hands raised
Okay.
and no new chats.
All right. Frazier, do you want to make a motion on this?
We don't actually need a motion at this point because it was just discuss or provide direction.
Oh, okay.
So,
as far as the direction goes,
I wasn't clear on what direction.
there's the options of allocating the money into a certain portion, and one of the suggestions I think is to put it into the Van Duzen and Rizzinia roads. So is that, we're just allowed to openly discuss the options of where this money can be spent? Is that my understanding?
my understanding of the item is that the director brought it to your attention so that you would understand that there's funding being brought to the road department, and he's presenting his best uses for it, and you can advise if you think there are better uses.
Okay, so
Are we making any budget transfers from, okay, if we're not, if it's staying within the budget and we're not making transfers, then I don't think we need, if we're making budget transfers from one account to another, then yes, we would need approval from the board.
I mean, the item is written says is that authorize the executive secretary to execute necessary agreements.
I missed that one, sorry, you're right. So there is a motion that's needed here. Thank you.
So,
You know, if you're not careful, you're gonna get thrown out.
yeah, we just make
There's the last public things you're gonna have to deal with.
So the department recommendation is to approve requested action, and to clarify that, that would be to put the money towards the Xenia roads, is that correct?
Yes, the Ruth Senior project.
Okay. Are there any objections to the department recommendation? Hearing none. Frazier, you want to make this motion?
I guess I will make a motion that we accept item 5.3 as presented.
I will second that.
All right, and then we have a motion from Supervisor Frazier, a second from Supervisor Gogan. Please vote the board.
Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbet.
There's a second issue concerning the STIP dollars of $498.
Is that
That was in item 5.3, was it not?
Yeah, it was, if you read the alternatives, its first one is the funds that come through the STBGP program, and then the second one is the $498,797 that come through the STIP funds. And that was recommended to use, substitute out Deloma.
okay, so that 200,000?
No, that 200 went to the FLAP, the Louisiana Van Duzen project.
Okay.
The STIP, which is another program,
Okay.
that is going to substitute out an existing program project and put the dollars in there that have a limit or a time limit to them, and program those with the time limit, and take the unlimited dollars and put them back into our unprogrammed balance It's essentially.
That was what you presented though, wasn't it? So I think that should be covered by my.
Well, you specifically
motion.
had mentioned the 200,000.
I just said, my motion was to accept item 5.3 as presented. So I think you're good.
Okay, sorry, my apologies.
No worries. All right, thank you, Mr. David.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so it is 12:40, and that concludes our public hearing and county matters. So all that's left is closed session. So I'm going to go ahead and read out the closed session items, and then we will come back to the boardroom here. I'm going to go, what, 1:45? All right, 1:45, we will reconvene for closed session. Item 6.1. Government Code Section 54954.5C, Conference with Legal Counsel, anticipated litigation, number of cases 1. And item 6.2, Government Code Section 54954.5C, Conference with Legal Counsel, existing litigation, number of cases 1. Trinity Action Association, Inc. versus Trinity, County of Trinity, et al., Trinity County Superior Court case number 19CV001. Thank you for joining us at this board meeting.
Excuse me, public comment, thank you.
Please, public comment.
John Brower from Junction City. I'd like to comment on the closed session item. Don't have no idea what the first item would be. It'd be nice if we listed the litigants.
It's anticipated, that's why it's not listed.
But the second item I would like to speak on, and that I want to encourage the board to invite the director of CalCan from CDFA, Richard Perrott, and his legal counsel, Crystal D'Souza, to come and present, like they have in other counties, including Mendocino recently, regarding the state provisional licensing program. And also encourage the supervisors that the Trinity Action Association versus Trinity County legal case affects the citizens of Trinity County generally. It's very important to this county, and they seek to enjoin the cannabis permitting program, which is likely the largest employer in the county. That agree? It affects us all generally. So I would like to see those matters handled in a public forum, not closed session, as much as possible.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, now you're good.
All right, so 1:45.
That was the first time I heard from John Brower all day.